across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed the Afternoon Empire. Yeah, welcome to the home of common sense. We've got a shed load of stuff going on here. Vladimir Putin, I mean, who'd have thought it? Vladimir Putin warning that Russia is ready to go to war with us. Yes, he says ready to go to war with Europe, accusing European leaders of sabotaging US-Russian peace talks. This is a madman, of course, and we'll come on to that detail in a few moments' time. Could we win a war against Russia? We'll look at that in a couple of moments. Also this afternoon, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, that's the OECD, has warned Rachel Reeves's £26 billion tax rise will drag the UK growth for years, with Britain still set for the highest G7 inflation. The bad news just keeps on coming her way. We'll look at that story too. And Nigel Farage has reportedly told donors that Reform expects to do a deal with the Conservative Party, although he does deny it publicly. Options would include are you ready for this? A Johnson-led mega party, I mean, scrap that now, or a cooperation pact of some kind, but Farage insists any move would be on his terms. Would that stop you voting Reform if you thought that we're getting into bed with the Tories, the party you legged it from? We'll have details on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. The number you need, drop us a voice note on this number as well, 0344 499 1000, or you can message 87222. Could we win a war against Russia? Vladimir Putin, of course, let's just be honest here, is a dictator, an authoritarian who cares nothing for the Russian people. He's occupied solely with being a global figure, a global powerhouse, expanding Russian territory, even if that means sliding into another country, stealing its land, killing its people, and then complaining when the enemy might get upset about it. This is a man who will kill journalists, beat the life out of protesters, imprison those politicians who oppose him. There's no free press in Russia. There's no basic right to counter opinion. The former KGB man will stop at nothing to rebuild his crumbling empire, and if that means death to anyone that stands in his way, then so be it. Russia is not a good place to be. If I was in Russia as a Russian saying any of this, I'd be doing a lengthy stretch in the Gulag by about 3:30. Lucy Connolly would be looking at 4 life sentences. Never go against the government line or the official line, no matter what it is. There's no freedom of speech down Russia way. But this is a man who digs his heels in, off his head, some say, with the thirst for power. A reason they call him Tootin' Putin, apparently. But they are prepared, he said it himself yesterday, to go to war with Russia. He's declared he accused leaders from the continent of trying to scupper his peace deal with the United States. I think that peace deal, in basic Janet and John terms, sort of involves not conceding land that doesn't belong to him. You can't invade a place, claim a bit of land, and then suggest that that should be part of your peace deal. Well, you give me that bit of land, surely. I don't think it works that way. We know that hours before the meeting with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, these are Donald Trump's envoys at the Kremlin, the Russian president said European tweaks to the plan to end the war were unacceptable, he said. Russia and the US have agreed to a 28-point plan, which France said amounted to a capitulation for Ukraine. It included having the size of the Russian, halving the size of the Ukrainian army, banning the country from joining NATO, and handing Putin back most of Russia's frozen assets, as well as full ownership of 3 key regions in Ukraine. So if there was this all-out war, and by the way, there are still voices, we've talked about this before, it's absolutely fascinating. There is a kind of a Team Russia kind of sense out there. It's definitely a Team Putin. So I think it's because he's well-hard, you know, he looks like an hard bloke, despite, you know, any other leader who had that much cosmetic surgery would simply be lampooned and satirised for the rest of time. But no, Vlad, tough man, yeah, talks for his people, doesn't he? Yeah, he knows what he's doing, he knows how to get it. Yeah, invade another country and steal their land. Could we conceivably win a war against Russia. 0344 499 1000. That is where you'll find us. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Chloe Dobbs is back with us. Chloe, of course, Conservative commentator and all-round good person. Chloe, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Ian.
Nice to have you with us as ever. So this is quite a pivotal moment when a world leader starts talking in war-type terms. I think you have to take it incredibly serious, and it does beg the question. He says he's ready to go to war with Europe, accusing European leaders of sabotaging any potential US-Russian peace deal. The question is, are we getting ready for something like this again? Two tribes, of course. This was back in the day when Russia were the enemy, the Iron Curtain was firmly in place, and there seemed to be no chance of any kind of deal. As it turns out, there was, and Gorbachev, Thatcher, Reagan made it all better again. We're in different territory this time, Chloe.
Well, look, just because Putin says that he's ready to go to war with Europe doesn't mean that he actually is. Bear in mind that they have lost an insane number of young men. Same for Ukraine in this war that they hoped would only last about a week and has gone on for years and years. On the other hand, they have over that time very much geared their economy to a wartime economy, making munitions, and have been able to adapt to that to some extent. But I do think that we do need to be gravely concerned in Europe, even if it is unlikely that we end up at war with Russia. We need to be quite concerned about the fact that we are nowhere near ready to go to war, partly because we've given a whole load of our stuff to Ukraine. We've given them our rockets, we've given them our munitions, not to mention the fact that they haven't had the right funding and whatnot that they need in the armed forces. One thing to note from the budget is that Trump might not be too happy with it, because there wasn't, of all the things that Rachel wanted to splash cash on, mostly benefits, so there wasn't really any mention of increasing funding to our military, and I think that is quite concerning. I think it's unlikely, but we need to be ready, and it's important as a negotiator, even if we don't ever end up going to war with anybody. It's important for our negotiating position with any country that we are in a position where we say, if you were to invade us, we could fight back.
Indeed, and of course this would be a European war against Russia. I mean, these are Putin's words, not... I mean, somebody said, we put this question on social media, and Orion said, what a dumb question. Well, we didn't start the question. Vladimir Putin initiated the question by suggesting he's ready to go to war with Europe. I mean, these were his words just yesterday. And of course, he seems to be grumpy, Chloe, that European leaders, Macron has spoken out about this already, but broadly speaking, the coalition of the willing, or whatever awful term they've given themselves, suggests that you can't have within a peace deal anything that suggests Russia can retain land that it's invaded. That's not unreasonable.
Well, there's been uncompromising attitudes on both sides, for sure. And I think that the failure of these talks with the Kremlin shows that Russia are also quite uncompromising. Both Zelensky and Putin are very, very much clear that they own everything, they should have everything, and they don't want to be compromising. And I think there's definitely been a change of tone from the Trump administration, from that first meeting with Trump and Zelensky in the Oval Office, where it all ended up in a shouting match and it fell apart, because at that time they thought, oh, Putin's the one we can negotiate with, Zelensky is the one that's being completely unreasonable and ungrateful for the help that we've given them. But now it's looking like Putin is also being very, very difficult to deal with. Trump is known as an amazing negotiator, but he hasn't managed to get his way with Putin. And what happened with those talks yesterday, where Putin did a bit of a soft power play by making them wait for hours on end, that's going to annoy the Trump administration for sure.
And what about that wider question that comes up? I mean, the kind of I'm Team Putin brigade. There is that group out there, bearing in mind, you know, we don't afford Kim Jong-un in North Korea the same kind of reverential treatment, who runs not a dissimilar empire in many respects. It's a dictatorship. It's run by the government. There's no free press. There's no real freedom of opinion. Journalists getting locked up for long periods of time. Protesters on the street getting their heads kicked in because they disagree with Putin's government. All manner of shady goings on. If you pick up a cup of tea in the wrong hotel around the world, it might be laced with something awful. I mean, that's how they roll over there. And yet there is this kind of weird sort of, I quite like Putin. What's that all about?
I think that it seems somewhat appealing to people when they are seeing things happening in the West, where we've got a country that hates itself, it would seem, and countries in the West that hate themselves, a lack of patriotism. Small things like, for example, people being absolutely fed up with the wokery in this country, and they look to Russia and they see, oh, there's no wokery there, none of this gender nonsense there, and they still believe in family values and whatnot over there. And I believe they actually set up a visa to allow people from the West who are fed up of the insane wokery to go and move to Russia. And things like seeing that in Russia there's an absolutely no nonsense approach to illegal migration. If you try to get into Russia illegally, you will be dealt with quite brutally.
Absolutely. I don't know how many migrants try to go to Russia, though. I mean, I can imagine that's the bottom of the list, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the few that have tried have faced the consequences, and hence there is a deterrent there. And not to get into get sidetracked with the human rights and whatnot of all that, but people see a few things about Russia and think, gosh, they're doing some things right that we're not doing right in the West, but they often then overlook all of the horrific things that happen in Russia.
But that's very true. But the kind of weird counter to that, in a curious way, Chloe, is that if Putin had a policy that he was going to put migrants up in a hotel, and then somebody on social media went full guns against it, then that probably would be something they would get locked up for, because you're going against the government line, even if it's a weird line.
Well, this is the thing, and as I say, that is one thing that people often overlook. But then again, they look at the number of people that get arrested in the UK for their speech, be it on social media or elsewhere, and compared to Russia, and they see that it is far higher here in the UK. But those numbers probably are a consequence of people in Russia not trying their luck and just keeping quiet. And there are plenty of people who live in Russia who aren't political, who aren't desperate to be some sort of political mischievous candidate or journalist, and they just live their lives, and they live a happy, safe family life, and they quite like Russia and their country. And I think some people look to that lifestyle and they think, oh, isn't it nicer than here in the UK, where we've got people running around the streets with machetes, and we've got all these random men
I get it, and there is
shores.
You're right, there is that sense that, and again with Trump, I'm not a Trump super fan by any means, but I do like the cut of his jib when it comes to the telling it like it is thing. And I know sometimes that's not always pretty. I don't think it's particularly clever to be calling journalists piggy because you don't like the question they just asked you or whatever else. It might make us chuckle from time to time. And I know he's got some, horrific skeletons in his cupboard, but boy, would I like to hear one of our leaders get that animated about immigration and people that shouldn't be in the country. Just that fire in the belly that you want to hear. And I think Putin, similarly, probably chants from a similar hymn sheet, which is why there is that sense of, we need a tough leader.
Yeah, I mean, Keir Starmer, he looks so.
Oh, he's
weak.
great, isn't he?
I was just watching PMQs again today, nearly falling asleep because he's just reading off his crib sheet. Can't think on his feet at all. No conviction. Can't answer the question. And look, I don't like Putin. He is a dictator. But the one thing he has going for him over Starmer is he comes across as a strong figure who seems like he's got an ounce of personality. Same goes for Trump. Same goes for Farage. Same goes for Zach Polanski in the sense that he's got an ounce of personality. And look what's happening to the Green Party in the polls, even though their policies make absolutely no sense whatsoever.
The populism on left or right seems to kind of be working. Let's move to this story, Chloe. The Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, that's the OECD, has warning that Rachel Reeves's 26 billion quid's worth of tax rises will drag on UK growth for years. I mean, tell us something we didn't know. With Britain still set to get the highest G7 inflation, growth remains weak, unemployment flat, and only a small rate cut expected. The budget leak, of course, is now deepening. The Treasury's top civil servant now involved after the OBR chair quit. A major business surveys show hiring is turning negative.
What a surprise, Ian. Sorry, I didn't realise you were playing a clip there.
No, it's all right. They could come in at any time, I promise you.
Do you want to play your clip?
No, go on. You carry on.
I mean, what a surprise that if you tax people to death, then businesses don't grow as much, and people stop working because work doesn't pay as much. The economy starts shrinking. No surprise that if you hike up the minimum wage and you hike up national insurance and you hike up taxes generally, that businesses have higher costs, and then we end up with higher prices on the shelves and higher inflation. I mean, you don't need
9-year-olds know this, Chloe?
Yeah, you don't need to be a genius to figure this out. There's been a meme going around on one of these fake Parliament petitions saying force Rachel Reeves to resit GCSE maths, which is quite funny.
And chess as well, for that matter.
Yeah, but look, Ian, if they were just honest with us, I would actually have a little bit more respect for them. But I am fed up of them gaslighting us and lying to us and constantly telling us that everything in the economy is going swimmingly, when this report and so many other reports have shown that this is not the case. They boasted at the budget, and Starmer did it again at PMQs today, about how brilliantly the economy is going and how much growth they are creating, because they managed to have their figure upgraded for this year's growth from, I think, 1 to 1.5%, completely ignoring the fact that their growth forecasts for the rest of Parliament have all been downgraded because of their policies and their tax rises, not because of Brexit, not because of the Tories, not because of global headwinds and all these things that Rachel Reeves likes to blame. They have messed up massively, and they don't have the humility to at least be honest with us about the situation.
100%. Listen, Chloe, stay with us. Loads more still to come. We'll talk about Nigel Farage talking about potentially a pact with the Conservative Party. Isn't really being isn't really being said publicly, but apparently that's what he's told some Tory donors. Expect to deal with the Tories. Your thoughts on that, and of course we'll tuck back into David Lammy and his jury trial debacle back on the agenda too. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news, and that question: could we, when I say we, I mean we're talking about Europe as a continent, win a war with Russia? I mean, these are the words of Vladimir Putin. He's ready to go to war. I mean, what is this? You are forced to ask the question, well, what would happen if we did? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk. Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 23 minutes after 1 o'clock. Chrissy says, Ian, stop threatening us with war. Well, I wish I had the power for such a thing. Because some people may believe it. Putin has no intention of going to war. He knows if he waits long enough, he will get Eastern Europe without firing a shot, like he did in 1945. I mean, you have to remember, we're talking about Europe here, not the EU, our continent. This is our patch. There's a war on our patch that we haven't seen since 1945, and an invasion, a subjugation that took place years ago now, it seems, when Putin invaded Russia. We can't just ignore that. So when you hear the Russian leader come out and start talking about the... oh, Chloe's back with us. It's interesting. The Russian leader come out and start talking about war, and he's ready to go to war, you do have to kind of like scratch your head a little bit. Chloe Dobbs is back with us. Well, she was there all the time, apparently. Let's go to this story, Chloe. David Lammy, he's not going to be out of the headlines anytime soon, revealing plans to halve the jury trials, of course, from 15,000 to around about 7.5, so halving them, essentially, shifting many cases to magistrates' court. Only 1.5% of all cases are heard by a jury under the proposal, and magistrate sentencing powers rise to 18 months, potentially 2 years. New sort of Canadian-style swift courts aim to cut hearing times by 20%. Let's have a listen to the Justice Secretary.
Sir Brian estimates that they will deliver justice at least 20% faster than jury trials. And whilst jury deliberations remain confidential, judges provide reasoning for their verdicts in open court. So this will hardwire transparency into our new approach. I'd like to clear up some misconceptions that colleagues unfamiliar in this area might hold. In England and Wales, magistrates have long done the vast majority of criminal cases. That was true in the Victorian era, it's right through to Winston Churchill's time, and today magistrates hear about 90% of criminal cases. In fact, only 3% of trial cases in England and Wales will ever go before a jury.
David Lammy, now it feels like an old story now, Chloe, but it's not going to go away, of course, because all the contention around this is still there. There's a lot of angry people, and there'll be a lot of innocent people who are hoping, well, actually, I'll be able to prove my innocence in front of a jury who will be told, sorry, you won't get that opportunity.
Yeah, you say it seems like an old story now, and that is because Lammy sort of tested this idea by leaking it out to the press at an earlier date, I think, to which most people said that's a silly idea. We think that the jury is a very unique thing to this country, and we want that as a part of our justice system, even if that means that we still have a large backlog. Yet he has still gone ahead with it, which I think is a bit surprising. But we know that Labour aren't really the best at listening to the public and what they think. I mean, look, there are merits on both sides of the argument. I understand the point he is making about wanting to cut down the backlog, because there are a heck of a lot of people who have waited a crazy amount of time for their court cases, and that has a extremely difficult mental toll on people who are living in purgatory, not knowing what is going to happen to them and their lives. But I do think keep juries. I think that a lot of people worry that this would be the beginning of the end of juries. So even if this is just going to, cutting the number of cases going to jury in half in the first place is still quite significant, but some people think that that would be the beginning of the end, and they would completely phase it out if they see, oh, this is a great way to cut down the time, the backlog for cases. But I think all you're going to need, Ian, if they do this, is a few cases going big in the press where they would have had a jury before David Lammy's changes, then they didn't have a jury, and then it looks like a miscarriage of justice, and that is going to infuriate people. And one point that David Lammy has been making is the need for there to be faith in this country's justice system, and he thinks that his move is going to help restore faith in the justice system, but I think it's going to do the opposite, because I think people might see more cases where they think that a rogue judge has acted alone, an activist judge, and there hasn't been an opportunity for members of the public, the jury, to look at it with an outside perspective.
Okay, let's move on then to this story, Chloe. Nigel Farage telling donors to expect, and this is really interesting, telling donors to expect a deal with the Conservative Party, though he denies this publicly, of course. Options apparently, I don't know where this came from even, include a Johnson-led mega party. Well, surely it would be a Farage-led mega party, you would think, or some sort of cooperation pact. Nigel Farage insists any move will be on his terms. Conservatives currently polling at 17%. Reform are always in the high 20s at the moment. 3 ex-Tory MPs joining Reform over the last few days, raising big fears over a right-wing split. It's worth having a listening to Richard Tice, second in command over there at Reform UK, on what he said about a potential deal with the Conservatives.
In one sentence, with one question, imagine I'm Noel Edmonds. Richard Tice, deal or no deal?
No deal.
Oh, there you go. No deal. That is it. That's all we get. I thought he was going to go into a really nice monologue there, Chloe, about the reasons why there could be no deal. Of course, politicians will always say that. I know Richard very well. I'm sure he absolutely means it in the moment. But you can't help but wonder, when you really crunch down on the numbers, is the only way the Conservatives can win an election, that Reform can win an election, is by doing a deal with the Conservatives?
I don't think that that is the case. I think we've had so many polls come out showing that Reform can do it alone, and they still have several years left to get their ducks in the row and watch the Tories dwindle and die even further, right? But so it makes sense for Reform to, for now, say we don't want to do a deal with the Tories, we want to do it alone, and it's very important for their brand to show that we are different to the Tories. We are not just going to become the Tory party with a different name slapped on the front of it, and hence they need to be careful with the Tories that they allow in. They're very careful about which Tory defectors they allow into the party. But let's be realistic, right? If it came to it and we had a general election and the result was that Reform could form a government by doing a coalition with the Tories, or they would have to hand the keys to number 10 to Labour. If that is how the result came out, of course there would be some kind of deal. But let's be honest, which party, looking at the polls, the past 100 odd polls that we've had, which Tory is going to end up with the most seats, Reform or Tories, is probably going to be Reform. So the idea that it would be a Tory in charge of this coalition,
yeah, that's
Reform
the bit.
would be,
and also,
especially Boris Johnson.
Why would it be Boris Johnson?
It wouldn't be Boris, because they are furious with Boris. Remember that they stood aside previously to allow Boris to get his mega majority, and they felt like he squandered Brexit and he completely failed on immigration, two things that the Reform Party really care about. So I don't know where that rumour has come from, but I'm a bit sceptical, Ian.
I do wonder, however, that it won't be a Johnson-led anything, as you rightly say, Chloe, but I do think that it would be... I know the polls are very generous to Reform, but when you look a little deeper, I think most commentators say it would be extraordinary if they got an outright majority. They will do very well. They'll probably be based on the current situation, probably be the leading party, which would mean they'd have to do a deal with somebody. Now, they're not going to do it with the Green Party, are they? So one would assume it would be the Conservatives, but that's never decided until the day, of course, but we will watch with interest. Chloe, thank you very much. As ever, Chloe Dobbs with us, Conservative commentator. I'm going to throw that over to you as well in terms of look, a lot of people who vote Reform were Conservatives, of course. That was the whole thing. I mean, even, you know, Nigel Farage himself, Richard Tice himself, were Conservatives. Look at the amount of MPs, Jonathan Gullis recently, legging it over to Reform, and many others have done exactly that, lots of councillors and the like. So the idea that Reform would now do a deal with the Conservatives, and you're not going to hear about anything like this for a long, long time, only if the polls really shift, and certainly if it came to a general election. Would that, as a Reform voter, how do you feel about that, about the Reform UK party doing a deal with the Tories, the party that you left? Thoughts on that as well, 0344 499 1000. I also want to bring this in as well. Chocolate Mousse says, reference that question of could we conceivably go to war with Russia or win one? He says, why not explain the Minsk agreement to your listeners, or talk about the ethnic cleansing of Russians by the Ukrainian army in 2014, or how before the Yanks installed their puppet government that you and your ilk used to commentate that Ukraine was the most corrupt country in Europe. I think Chocolate Mousse is confusing me with somebody who might disagree with him. I don't disagree with much of that at all. I will put, because you can wear two hats here. Putin did invade Ukraine. That is true. Is Ukraine a bastion of democratic excellence and brilliance that you would teach the world over that this is a great reflection of how we should all... Of course it's not. Zelensky, I wouldn't trust out the back mowing the grass. But he didn't invade Russia on this occasion. We're going to speak to Tobias Elwood shortly. We'll get his take on that very question from Chocolate Mousse. It's not the name I've given him. That's the name he is on Twitter. Our lines are open, of course, on all of that. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This comes from Cliff in Berkshire, who says, afternoon, Ian, it seems to me that the EU and the UK rather fancy a conflict with Russia. They push Ukraine to push to join both NATO and the EU. It's all very well being tough whilst you've got a big mate behind you. But would the USA follow us into a conflict? Those in eastern Ukraine speak Russian, and culturally more Russian than Ukrainian. It is a mess. Well, remember, it was shortly after one of the many press conferences that Trump did allude to whether there would be European boots on the ground. This was in a sort of peacekeeping capacity, but he was kind of ruling out, I think, American assistance on on the territory itself. But we do know that yesterday Vladimir Putin warned that Russia is ready to go to war with Europe, accusing European leaders of sabotaging the US-Russian peace talks. That's how we remember it back in the day. Two tribes. It was Reagan, it was Gorbachev. Could there ever be peace? And of course, hallelujah, there was. Throw in a bit of Mrs. Thatcher and everything looked tickety-boo for a few years. But today, it's a very different regime. Putin said that Europe's changes to a US-Russia 28-point Ukrainian peace plan were unacceptable. He criticised France on this because France have criticised the plan as a capitulation that would cut Ukraine's army in half. It would block their NATO membership, return frozen Russian assets and give Moscow full control of key regions in Ukraine. We'll speak to Tobias Ellwood, former Defence Minister, Foreign Minister and former Conservative MP as well. First, Steve Gill, former advisor to both the Clinton and the Bush administration. Steve, good afternoon to you, sir. We remember that era back in the day. Could the Iron Curtain come tumbling down? And boy, it did. Reagan and Thatcher, Gorbachev, what a trio of delight they were. Seemed like romantic days looking back.
Yeah, we're both old enough to remember those days. I think that may be a tribute to our age rather than our recollection. I think it's interesting that this conversation between Steve Witkoff, Kushner, and Putin reportedly took 5 or 6 hours. Generally, that means you're moving from kind of the top line broad agreement to some of the nitty-gritty details. So I'm a little bit surprised that this is now being portrayed as a rejection of the peace deal when they seem to have been taking into some pretty good detail of what this 28-point plan was going to lead to. The framework that has previously been agreed to, reportedly, by Trump and Putin is what they've been trying to work through. And yet, as you just mentioned, you have the EU and NATO continuing to demand that Ukraine be admitted to NATO, which is contrary to previous agreements, and which is a bright red line that Putin will not agree to. And then I think the other thing that bothers me is that one of the things that both the European leadership and Zelensky insist on is no accountability, no accounting, no audit of where the hundreds of billions of dollars have gone into Ukraine, into the pockets of corruptocrats. As a Tennessee resident and U.S. taxpayer, I want to know where my money went, and if it went into the money of these corrupt bureaucrats, I want my money back.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely with you on that, Steve. Of course, Putin wants his land back, though. That's how he would frame it. And that's whatever way we slice this 28-point plan or whatever plan we end up seeing, we just know it's going to include, I want that bit and I want that bit, and maybe another bit in the middle. And that seems to be the irredeemable sticking point.
Yeah, and I've said for several years that, when you look at the territories that Russia has taken, and that people in those territories have voted to be part of the Russian Federation, repeatedly have sent representatives to Moscow as their elected representatives. To me, the big sticking point has been and remains what happens to Odessa. It has traditionally been Russian. It has long been Russian. And until the Odessa question gets resolved, whether it's militarily or diplomatically, I don't think there is going to be a peace deal.
In terms of Russia invaded another country, and that is it. That's the headline. That's, of course, the line that certainly the West dine out on. It's a simple invasion, a subjugation of a sovereign nation, and therefore there are no areas to negotiate on this other than get the hell out of town. Is that too simple for you?
I think it's way too simple. Again, let's go back to 2014, where Victoria Nuland and others in Europe negotiated a coup, the Maidan Revolution. The Ukrainians had elected representatives that were too Russia-leaning for Europe and for the U.S., so we replaced the leaders they elected with ones that would lean to the U.S. Zelensky got elected a few years ago, promising to end the conflict in eastern Ukraine, where the militia and others were attacking the residents of Luhansk and Donetsk and Mariupol. He did not do that. And then again, you had the promises that Ukraine would not become a part of NATO. Kamala Harris went to Ukraine and said, we're going to bring Ukraine into NATO. And 3 days later, President Putin and the Russians invaded to stop that because of previous promises that it would not happen. So I think both sides bear the blame for what has happened. I think there's been plenty of paths to peace that would not have had the carnage we've seen. But unfortunately, we keep seeing the same issues brought to bear, including Ukraine being in NATO, including the, quote, recovery of these territories that have been lost, and a lack of recognition by many in Europe and in the U.S. that Ukraine is losing on the battlefield. You had the Secretary General, Mark Rutte, just several months ago say, oh, Ukraine is winning. It's just the front line is moving in the wrong direction. One of the most insidiously stupid comments of an international leader that I've ever heard.
Final question, Steve. Fast forward a year, where will we be?
I think, again, until there is some resolution of what happens to Odessa, which was one of the main military ports for Russia for decades, what happens to Odessa? You may be able to carve out eastern Ukraine and find a resolution. There may be some sort of a kind of a Odessa belongs to both of us agreement. But I think that militarily this thing is going to continue as long as Zelensky and his corrupt bureaucrats are in power in Ukraine. There are talks that he may be being removed by his parliament. He may see an exit as more profitable and safe than staying. But I think this time next year, unfortunately, Ian, I think we're still where we are.
Steve, great to have you on, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Back to Christmas life in Tennessee. Steve Gill, he's a former advisor to President Clinton and President Bush. He knows his territory in this sense. That's his view. Let's get some thoughts from Tobias Ellwood, another politician always across this detail, former Defence and Foreign Minister. Tobias, good afternoon to you. So where we're at the moment, we heard yesterday, of course, Mr. Putin saying he's ready to go to war with Russia. I don't think he was talking literally, but of course we do take these kind of comments seriously. What did you make, firstly, of the Russian leader saying that?
Well, good afternoon. Can I firstly push back on what we just heard with almost a rewriting of history? I go to Odessa frequently, and the mayor of Odessa, the head of the army there, the people of Odessa would be disgusted to hear anybody say that somehow Odessa needs to be carved up between the Ukrainians and indeed the Russians. It's very much part of Ukraine today, and that ultimately is what we are fighting for and supporting Ukraine, for the whole of Ukraine to remain Ukrainian. When any part of it is handed back to Putin, all that will simply happen is that there will be a pause, a lull, a regrouping of Russia, and then it will pursue advancement in Eastern Europe. That is what Putin wants to do. You mentioned quite rightly what happened at the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War. Well, Putin sees that as the worst time in Russian recent history, as a moment of sadness when the Soviet Union collapsed. He wants to emulate Stalin and rekindle that sense of influence in Eastern Europe. That's the bigger picture here. There is a war in Europe, and it happens to be that Ukraine is doing the fighting for us. And to place that in perspective, we are now subject to war from Russia. We can't push our marine capabilities out around the UK without being pressured or interfered with by Russian ships. We have cyber attacks on the UK on a regular basis. They are trying to clip our undersea cables. This is what Russia is doing today. Now imagine if they succeed in Ukraine, where does that go? That's why we need to be pushing back on Russia and helping Ukraine, or this does develop into a wider European war.
I mean, the question I put to Steve a moment ago, Tobias, in its kind of simplest sort of Janet and John type terms, was that, you know, here's a country called Ukraine, it's a sovereign nation, and then one day a few years ago it was literally invaded by another country called Russia. He pushed back on the simplicity of that definition. Is that how you see it, though?
I think you sum it up very well indeed. The next question is to say, what happens if Russia is allowed to get away with it? Where does Russia go next? And America's view is that, well, let's sign a deal now. We can all go home, as if it's a baseball game and we end up in a draw. We know in Europe that isn't the case. And my concern is that we've been taken down a road by America. We've been very patient with Donald Trump, that's been wanting to do a deal with President Putin. But what Trump wants to succeed is actually bring in Putin from the cold so he can secure minerals deals and so on and trade with Russia, caring less about European security. And I just wonder how many times we have to go around this buoy. They are sending, and I'm sorry to say this, and I say this as a dual national American, an amateur team compared with what they've done in the past of statecraft to Putin and the Kremlin. And in order to strike a deal, 28-point plan, which was basically a revamp of the Russian bullet points. That isn't in Europe's interest. It should be Europe leading this with America backing us up. And there's going to be a point, I believe, where we say, thank you, America, but if you're not with us, we're going to have to take this on our own, because ultimately it's our security that's going to be affected.
Let me just read you this final point, Tobias. It came from one of our listeners, and I said when I read this out earlier that I would put this point to you. He says, why not explain the Minsk agreement to your listeners, or talk about the ethnic cleansing of Russians by the Ukrainian army in 2014, or how before the Yanks installed their puppet government that you and your ilk used to commentate that Ukraine was one of the most corrupt countries in Europe. So we've got Minsk, ethnic cleansing, and the fact that Ukraine has ultimately always been a fairly corrupt place. What do you make of those comments?
Yes, as I say, I've been to Ukraine many times, and it's always saddened me, even back in 2014 and before, just how corrupt the country was, run by oligarchs. If you think of Poland today, how successful that economy is doing democratically, economically, and then right next door is Ukraine. They came out of the starting blocks exactly the same time when the Berlin Wall fell, and yet look what happened because of the very corruption that you speak of. But that doesn't justify allowing Russia to then invade and somehow say, yes, you can have 1/5 of the country. I make it very clear we've moved into a new era of insecurity. It isn't Ukraine that's going to be attacked in the future. It's us. And as I stressed, already those attacks are taking place.
But NATO is a red line, isn't it, for Putin? And it would be reasonable to say, you know, he had previously been told there will be certainly no NATO membership of Ukraine, and that seems to be now back on the table as far as the Ukrainians backed by Europe are concerned.
So your question is valid, but the bigger question is, what is the security guarantees to make sure Russia doesn't do this again in 2 or 3 years' time? It doesn't have to be NATO, but there needs to be something to say, how can that economy, if you're a business and wanted to invest in Ukraine, would you do so now unless there are some security guarantees to say, yes, I might as well spend millions of pounds in the next 5 years. I won't do so unless I know that Russia isn't going to invade again.
On that point, Tobias Ellwood, thank you for your time. He is, of course, former Defence and Foreign Minister and previously a Conservative MP. 0344 499 1000. We heard two very different views there on where we're at, Steve and Tobias. I mean, it is a question that is probably never going to come to this, but it was interesting that the Russian president used that conference yesterday to literally talk about we're ready to go to war with Europe. And that jumped out of my TV set when I heard that. I nearly choked on my Frosties at 10:30 last night. But that's what he said. Could we, as in our continent of Europe, win a war against Russia? Where do you see this thing ending? Calls on that. And the other one up and running as well, Nigel Farage, a potential pact with the Conservative Party. Would that ruin things for you? Would you not vote reform if you thought they were going to get into bed with the party you used to support? 0344 499 1000. the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, just gone 10 to 2. Let's get a word from Matt in Cheshire to kick us off. How you doing, Matt?
Hi, very good afternoon, Ian.
Afternoon to you. What are your thoughts?
The great Peter Cardwell once said, always be suspicious.
The great Peter Cardwell. That's funny, we've got a Peter Cardwell that works here as well.
Yeah, that's the very same Peter
Oh, really?
Cardwell.
Sorry. When you said the great... Yeah, I got...
I'm sure you won't be happy with you for that, Ian.
He's sitting outside, so give me the evils.
Always be suspicious of a consensus or somebody told him in his past. And Tobias Ellwood represents that consensus. Everything you said about Putin in your monologue was true, but you forgot to mention the failings of Zelensky.
I did mention that. I said a second ago I wouldn't trust him out the back mowing the grass.
No.
Somebody who's got his own rather disturbing backstory.
Yeah, he's avoided an election, pressured political opponents, imprisoned priests and members of the clergy, torn sons from the arms of their petrified mothers for conscription, and allegedly bought a multi-million-pound compound in Cyprus with corrupt money. If you fight a war and lose land, it's not a board game where you all put the pieces back in the end of the box at the end of the day and then everybody gets the land back. If you want the land back, you have to win it back, or you either fight on or give up.
Yeah.
So the West should seriously chastise Russia one last time and Putin, and then offer to welcome them back into the international community if they accept peace.
But of course, the trouble with that, Matt, is that peace will only come with some sort of concession of land, right?
Of course. But Putin has his own BRICS allies, as we know, and that's only getting stronger. And another decade of Russophobia will only strengthen it even more.
And that's where we're at. Listen, Matt, thank you very much indeed. There's some grim warnings out there. Thank you for that, Matt. And I've never thought, like all politicians, I mean, is Zelensky some kind of perfect character? I mean, the reason, of course, there's been no elections is because they're in a war. That's the official answer to it, but you can make your own minds up. Patricia is in Shrewsbury. We're not going to go to war, Patricia. I don't believe that for one second. But what would happen? I don't mean, who's got the biggest, war chest, Europe or Russia, but could Europe take on Russia?
I don't think it's taking on Russia. I think what I believe is that area has always been a difficulty for both countries. And it does seem to me, from what I've heard and what I've seen, that the people there are very mixed up anyway. They are either pro-Russian or pro-Ukraine. They seem confused to be themselves. So why not let them choose? It's happening organically. There are people now leaving their homes in that area and trying to get on trains back to Ukraine. They think there's going to be a war and that's going to be a difficult place to live in. Whatever. It's their place. It's the people that matter.
So you think in those Donetsk, wherever it happens to be, whichever region, there should be sort of kind of localized voting? Do you want to be run by Russia or Ukraine?
If you get confusion with people about who the hell they are they Russian, are they pro-Russian, or are they pro-Ukraine? If you get that kind of confusion amongst people, you will never have happiness. You will never be satisfied, and neither will Putin. We all know what he's like.
Yeah.
And the land itself, in God's name, it's killing thousands. I'm with Trump on this. Day after day,
Yeah, well, I mean, that is ultimately, the human question, in many respects, in an ideal world, would be the only one we'd be really examining.
Of course.
But of course, I
I
absolutely agree. And I think Trump's point is he just wants it to stop. I don't think Trump's interested in what is fair in terms of land or divvying up, who rules what.
He doesn't need it. Those are just little.
He needs to be able to say, I stopped a war. Yeah.
Well, okay,
Is he going to do that by sending his daughter's boyfriend into the Kremlin to negotiate with Putin?
Who did that?
Trump.
Oh yes, that one. Is it a boyfriend? I thought it was his son-in-law.
Yeah, I think they got married, didn't they?
I don't know. Oh,
not
really?
recently.
But I don't know. He has a way of spotting talent. Maybe the boy has talent. But
maybe he does.
I've heard nobody has thought. What about the people who are now living in that red line area? Let it become a red line that they chose.
Let it become a red line they choose. And, of course, many people would say, well, we shouldn't be putting it to a vote because it's not their land. That would be that ultimately is what it always comes back to. No, I agree. Listen, Patricia, I think in the absence of any logical kind of response from our politicians, you do seem to be offering up something that kind of, on paper, it makes absolute sense. I get it. Patricia, thank you for that. Paul says, Ian, I visited Moscow and a few other Russian cities about 8 years ago. Moscow, magnificent city. I always hear this. Restaurant, pubs, nightlife, far superior to anything we have here. The people are respectful, crime very low, very few non-Russians. They have zero issues with immigration. Trans is viewed as an illness. Some of them near to schools and public park communities, some of them near to schools and public parks. I'm not sure what that refers to. Please explain this madness. Indeed, absolutely right. But would you want to live there? Would you want to live under the regime of Russia? Visiting is one thing. Visitors in so many of those places are always made nice and welcome. A friend of mine went to China a couple of months back, said it was glorious where he was. I think it depends where you go. But I've always heard lovely things about people who've been to Moscow or Moscow. 0344 499 1000. Thoughts on this? And, of course, we'll go back to the Farage question. What would happen if Reform married up with the Tories? Would you still vote Reform? Lines are open. Let's get the news at 2.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. It is the home of common sense. Loads together, we'll continue to discuss that issue with Russia. Putin warning that Russia is ready to go to war with Europe. I mean, I think we'd probably win a war against Russia, wouldn't we? He's accusing European leaders of sabotaging the US-Russian peace talks. That's the general thrust of what he has to say. More comment on that from you. Also this afternoon, Nigel Farage has reportedly told Reform donors that he expects a deal with the Conservative Party, though he denies this publicly. Options include, and none of us can work out where this would have come from, because this won't happen, a Johnson-led mega party. I mean, seriously? Or a simple cooperation pact. Certainly the latter, if nothing else, but Mr Farage insists any move would have to be on his terms. Would you still vote for reform if they did a deal with the Tories? And the Ofsted chief, Sir Martin Oliver, has said that he backs an Australian-style under-16s social media ban, blaming platforms for rising exclusions and bad behaviour. If you are a parent of young kids in that pre-teen or teen age group, you will know what an utter nightmare it can be. Details on the way, everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Rich says, Ian, at the same time France is, I can't say that word, I can't believe Alicia, our producer, has given me a profanity to read out, but the fact she's given it to me means that legally I'm allowed to literally read this out. Are you ready for this? At the same time that France is, I can't do it. The Ofcom boys would hate me. Effing up the new military build-up, but insisting all by shot French kit UK has left. I'm not sure what that bit means, Betty. You couldn't even agree a peace force. Poland, Scandinavia, etc. will kick Russians' backsides if they try conventional war, while the EU-UK talks and spends its money on breeding insurrection. I mean, this is on, yeah, I mean, I get what Betty is saying there, with all the glorious language. But this is on European soil, right? And we do have a say in this. An invasion on European soil hasn't happened since the Second World War of this nature. Dale says, after all the needless death and destruction from the Russian invasion and all the billions of aid, if Ukraine capitulates, then I hope we in the UK will not be expected to help pick up the cost of rebuilding. And that's a genuine area of concern, isn't it? I mean, you might want to humanitarian-wise help out on something, but you know, there's these curious sort of playoffs you have to do with the books. Yes, we want to help, but no, we can't afford it. You know, do you scupper some? We're going to be talking in the next hour to Ian Duncan Smith on the story of a Brit that has been banged up in jail for 17 years. When you hear the story, it's quite extraordinary. But what's interesting is that the smart money says the reason the UK government, the last one, this one, the one before and the one before that and so on, aren't really making much of a noise about it is because they, got some nice trading deals with Dubai. So they want to keep it as that. So these kind of playing off one against the other for the greater good, even if it means individuals or whole groups of people may suffer. You do have to think about that. That's why I wouldn't want to run a country. I don't want to make those kind of decisions, do you? 0344 499 1000. Let's talk about that the Reform Tory story. We're reportedly, Mr Farage has told donors to Reform that he expects some kind of deal with the Conservative Party. He doesn't say this publicly. Richard Tice was speaking on Breakfast this morning with Jeremy Kyle. He ruled it out and said absolutely not. It's a big fat no. You are forced to wonder what would happen in the event of Reform being the biggest party at a general election but not having a majority big enough to govern. They'd have to go into bed with someone. We've seen that before. See 2010 for details. Let's get a word from Alex Wilson, Assembly member for Reform UK in the London Assembly. Alex, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Now, a lot of people would say, well, reform is mostly former Tories anyway, so why would it matter if there was some kind of deal?
Well, that simply isn't true. Look, we've had some quite high-profile Conservative defections. Yep. I get that. But if you look at where our voter base is coming from, and in particular, if you look week on week on week, we are gaining seats in council by-elections right across the country, and about half of those seats have come as gains from Labour, and the other half are split between the Conservatives and others. So the idea that we're just a Tory party 2.0 is not true. Yes, we're broadly on the right of centre, but we're looking to replace the Conservatives as the main party on the right of centre, not do a deal with them. So I don't know where this story has come from. I know the FT published it yesterday. I think the Mail might have picked up on it as well.
Yep.
But it's quite frankly nonsense. You've seen, you mentioned in your intro, Richard rubbishing the idea, Zia and Nigel have all gone on social media or media to say, no, this simply isn't happening, because why would we want to do a deal with the party that got us into this mess in the first place? Look, I was a former Conservative. I was a councillor. I joined Reform in 2020 as a result of lockdown. There was no way on God's earth I would want to put the party that dealt that devastating blow to our economy, to our schools, to our society, back into power. It's like putting the arsonist in charge of the fire brigade. It's just not going to happen.
Well, the Tories, of course, would say, well, we're not the same party that we used to be, so there's that. But also the other sort of uncomfortable potential reality, Alex, and I alluded to it at the beginning, is that if Reform were the largest party but didn't have a significant majority, you would have to go into bed with someone, and that would likely be the Conservatives.
But parliamentary arithmetic is one thing. I don't want to prejudge what the outcome of the next general election is, but we are going into that election fighting very, very hard to win, and to win outright. It's why we're very pleased with the opinion polling. We've been ahead in the national polling for, I think, somewhere in the region of 175 consecutive opinion polls. Even just since the local elections in May, we're the first party to have won 60 seats in council by-elections, net gain of 51. At the same time, the Conservatives have only won 18 seats, which is a net loss of 20. So they've lost more than half the seats in council by-elections that they've been defending just in the last few months. So we are very much a party that's on the up. They are a party that's very much going in the opposite direction. And this is troublemaking from somewhere, and we're going to get a lot of this over the next. But
is it troublemaking, Alex, or is it just maybe a reality, and maybe a reality some people quite embrace? If you look at you mentioned the defections, people like yourself, and more recently Leah Nicci, Chris Green, Jonathan Gullis, some high-profile ones. We've had all sorts over the last few months, defecting and gaining seats and power, mayoral elections, council elections, goodness knows what. So, I mean, it might just be that people are generally sort of speculating, and maybe with some reason, that this wouldn't be a bad thing. If you could get the best of the Tories, you could kick out the wets and ignore them. But if there had to be some kind of sort of supply and demand deal in some respects, what would it be so bad? Would it be so illogical?
The way for those people, the best of the Tories, as you call them, to get involved in getting Nigel into number 10 is to join Reform fully and get behind us as a party to say we're going into these elections in 2029 or earlier if the government collapses in the meantime, but also the Welsh elections, the Scottish elections, council elections next year. We're going into those with the absolute intention of winning them outright. And that's why we're building the branch network. It's why we're taking by-elections extremely seriously. I gave those figures earlier on how well we've been doing. Look, politics can go down as well as up. We know that. But certainly what we're looking to do is win on our own, get that clear mandate for change, because the Conservatives let down the country for too long. Labour are doing the same. That's why people are looking for something different now, and that's what we want to do.
Alex, thank you as ever. Alex Wilson, Assembly Member for Reform UK. That's the London Assembly he's part of. We are a few years away from a general election. It's kind of possible there might be one in between now and then. I don't think so. What is most likely to happen is there will be a leadership change of the current Labour government, and obviously the smart money says after the elections next May, which by the way is just over 20 weeks away. It's that close, where there could be absolute annihilation for Labour, and not just in a few random council seats, but I mean the entirety of Wales could be run by Reform. They won't get Scotland, but the whole picture will dent what is currently happening there for Labour. Mayoralties, council elections, some really significant possibilities. And that could mean a change of leadership for the Labour Party. Now, a change of leadership could be good for reform and also good for the Tories as well. If a more of a kind of old Corbynite-style character came in, they would see that as a fabulous open goal, one which they can enjoy right up until 2029. So it's not likely to be an election until then. A lot can happen, of course, in that time. A lot can happen with the Tories. A lot can happen with reform. I mean, there might be a point where, I don't know, Kemi Badenoch discovers her mojo. She seemed to discover it after the budget last week. Trebles all round for the response she gave to Rachel Reeves' dismal fiscal forecast and outlook. Can she keep that kind of momentum up? If she can, maybe we're in different territory if you're a Conservative. I can only see, based on everything right now, there would have to be a deal. I think there would have to be a deal with the Tories. And that would probably involve you'd throw a few high-profile jobs to the leader would get a good job, so she might become the Home Secretary. The Jenrick would get a good job. Those kind of characters would get a good job. And is there some kind of logic in coalition? The 2010 one was a bit weird, flipping weird, wasn't it? And I always looked at it as a management, an overseer, a temporary overseer of our affairs rather than a government. But they kind of rubbed along for a few years, not to everybody's liking, but you take the point. 0344 499 1000. Bob is in Ludlow on this point. Bob, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Ian. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, fire away.
Oh, good. Yeah, in all honesty, Reform have basically already imported half the Tory party that failed us for 14 years. So if you're talking about going into a general election in 3 or 4 years, if not sooner, and then basically importing the other half of the Tory party that failed us for 14 years, you're just going to get the Tory party.
Did they? I mean, this failed us for 14 years thing? Is that become a bit of an urban myth, though? I mean, you know, they won.
Not at all.
They won 3 or 4 elections in that 14 years.
Yeah, they won the elections, but they didn't win the country, and they didn't do anything for the financial good of the people of the country. I mean, basically, we've been stuck in this Blairite government system since 1997.
Well, then, of course, there was a global meltdown in 2008, and it was widely said then, you can write off the next 20 years, no matter who's in power.
Yeah, but realistically speaking, if they actually wanted to do government in a different way, with actually working for the country, not for themselves as in party, and not for the good of the EU, as in 2016 we voted for Brexit. We're still waiting for it, basically. And I mean, Northern Ireland is still stuck fully in the EU. Northern Ireland is no longer part of the United Kingdom.
Well, it is officially, but of course it's adhering to certain legal diktats from the EU, and that was sort of written into the deal, I guess. I don't know how you get out of that, do you?
Well, yeah, basically, you get rid of the ECHR and all the rest of it, and you bring Northern Ireland back into the fold fully of Great Britain and Northern Ireland being the United Kingdom, as it was originally. At the moment, all we've got is Great Britain, which is Scotland, England and Wales. We don't have Northern Ireland anymore.
Well, we do officially. You're saying it feels like we don't because of the agreements.
It's not a case of it feels like it.
It's still Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
There is a border between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, physically speaking.
For trade purposes, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not just for trade, it's for governmental purposes, because in reality they still adhere to EU government at the end of the day.
Yeah, not to everything, but to a fair deal. I hear what you're saying. Listen, Bob, thank you for that. You're right, it's not perfect, and I've never known why, when the Good Friday Agreement happened, that wasn't baked into it, the possibility. What would happen if there was a referendum on EU membership? Bearing in mind all parties at some point had said, yeah, we'll have a referendum on EU membership. Did nobody consider that? I mean, bearing in mind what they were dealing with, you had Bill Clinton, for God's sake, the US president. This was the sort of Blair Molan years when she was Northern Ireland secretary, and all manner of, every I was dotted, every T was crossed. They were looking at this foolproof, oven-baked deal. The Belfast Agreement, commonly known as the Good Friday Agreement, had got everything for everybody, more or less. There's going to be one or two people that go, that's not quite what I wanted, more or less. And nobody threw up the possibility, what if there was a referendum on EU membership? Did that never come up at one meeting? I'm absolutely I've always been fascinated by how that didn't raise its head. The Lib Dems back in the day had talked about a referendum on Europe. It's not as if that whole question was new. The Conservatives, Labour, had live discussions on this very point. No one floated. There was not a political lawyer in the room that went, I have to throw this in, bearing in mind what's at stake here. And this is peace in Ireland, and peace for those that live across the entire region, and that includes the country of Ireland and, of course, Northern Ireland. Peace all round, nothing bad to see. Everything rested on this, and no one threw that into the mix. Ben's in Essex. What have you got for us, Ben? Good afternoon to you. Nigel Farage, will you make a deal, do you think?
I don't know, and I've only just come across this story, and I get why in some ways it makes sense. I mean, I think, at the minute we've got this Labour government which are killing this country left, right and centre. And my concern is that they know they're going to get voted out at general election. They're going to appeal to all the people that are on benefits. And my fear is they're going to allow these migrants the right to vote, and they will have a majority. So I get strategically why this could work. But my concern with it is, I get, reforming the New Kids on the Block. Would they get the majority? I don't know. We need good leadership. We need solid leadership. As long as, you said before, we had this in 2010, was it, with the Tories? But, we just need to be run properly by a proper leader that's going to bring policy and that's going to serve the country. Can they do it with the Tories? Maybe.
What does that look like to you, Ben? Because it's a bit like when people say, how do you want the country run? And the answer is, I want it run better. And then somebody says, OK, give me your top 5 things that a leader should do. And then it gets a little trickier.
Yeah, you've got to have competent people, and you've got to have a policy and a I can't think the word of it now. Every party has got a doctrine, haven't they, of what they're going to bring to the country.
Yeah, pretty much.
That are going to represent that. And the people that are in, the Chancellor, the Prime Minister, really should be voted out by the public. But you need good, solid people that are going to stand there and do the work for the people, not become career politicians and lobbied and all of this kind of thing.
But have we kind of gone, you used to be, even up to sort of the Blair time, to a smaller degree, Cameron, only in the sense that he was youngish in prime ministerial terms, and, he was a bit Blairy to some, which is why some Labour voters went there, although he didn't get a stonking majority, of course, because he had to form a coalition. But back in the sort of Thatcher and Blair thing, the world was so different, Ben, wasn't it? We didn't have social media, and I think that's a massive factor in this story. We didn't have 24-hour news cycles in the same way. We didn't debate endlessly all day long. Even a newspaper column has a comment section at the end where you can comment, opinion. It's all over the place. So we have a sort of different... It's kind of rewired our views of politicians, whereas previously there was a little bit of mystery around some of these people, even though they were on the telly and you read about them every day in the newspapers. There was something that was sort of left to, not to so much the imagination, but they were left to their own devices without ruling by committee, which seems to be happening now. Social media go up in arms, something goes viral, and suddenly a Prime Minister is responding to it.
I think the problem is we've got people in power that are more worried about the lobbyists, these committees, these think tanks that they're attached to, which has to go. And then you've got social media. I think these people are more interested in the standing up, the claps, the being on stage, what they appeal to other people. I think it's rare to have a leader that actually wants to serve for the people and the greater good, and that's what we need. And it's just a shame that these politicians can't be held accountable for the decisions that they make. I mean, look at Labour, the U-turns, the wastage. I mean, anyone that's in a job that does so, if you make a mistake, go back on what you say or waste money, you'd be sacked. You'd be brought in and said, why have you done this?
Yeah. Well, that's been the case forever, isn't it? You know, Labour, the Tories, they bring in, a new computer system to run the NHS. I think that was a sort of a Labour thing back in the day. The Tories, similarly, in all sorts of areas. And, you know, then they cancel it. And you go, well, it costs 20 billion quid. And you just can't, really? So there's a lot of that going on. I don't know. Yeah, I wish I knew the answer. If I knew the answer, I'd be a very rich man, Ben, and probably wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah.
Great call, though. Thank you for that, Ben, in Essex. 0344 499 1000. Yeah, how do we do government better? It's a really fascinating question. It's a great one to chew over. Happy to take some calls on that as well. What we want and what is achievable. How wide is that gap between those 2 points? Lines are open. This is Talk. The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Yes, welcome back to the home of common sense. Lots to get through, more calls from you. Let's get a word from David in Essex. David, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Ian. Yeah, I've dabbled with changing my vote. I'm a Conservative. I've thought about voting for reform. Reform. Just look at reform at the moment. You've had infighting. So we're back in peace. Rupert Lowe's gone off on his own. You've got a guy who's just been convicted of spying against our country from reform. You've got Nigel Farage and Sarah.
I don't think he was convicted of spying, by the way, but yeah, I take your point.
Take my point. You've got Farage and poaching. They've got embroiled in accusations of racism. You've got the schools that have been taken over by reform in absolute chaos with their budget. So when I look at that, I think, hello a minute, what's Tommy Badenoch doing? What's she saying? She's taking the fight. She's taking the fight to Keir Starmer.
Yep.
She's the one that's saying she's going to sort out the welfare reform, not having people live on welfare street.
Yep.
She's the one saying how to balance the books. So to me, I'm thinking, you know, people have got to open up their eyes and ears and start taking in what Kemi Badenoch is saying, because I think Nigel Farage is just going to be another Keir Starmer, absolute chaos.
I mean, I don't think he'll be I know what you're saying is you won't get the results you think you're going to get, rather than he'll sort of emulate Keir Starmer, because he certainly doesn't do that. He's a very strong, loud voice.
But he's saying nothing. He's saying nothing. He's not got any policies. I don't know why your station is so embroiled with reform. Do you know?
I tell you what, it's not about being embroiled with reform, it's about being embroiled with the mood of the nation. And the mood of the nation at the moment is switching from, you know, if you like, convention, groupthink, history, and crying out for something new. Now, the Green Party are also an interesting story in this respect, because their star is rising as well. Don't get me wrong, I've got no idea why. Jack Palahniuk is absolutely bloody hopeless. I mean, he doesn't look good, he doesn't sound good. For some reason, there's momentum behind the man at the moment. He's also growing.
Yeah, but I'm not phoning in about him. I'm phoning in about...
No, but I'm responding as to why there is this curious appetite. I hear what you're saying. And I guess, just to encapsulate your points on what you first mentioned, David, you're kind of making the point that there are, you know, quite a lot of question marks over certain characters in that party, which, if they were in any other party, they'd be getting torn to bits.
Well, I don't think Kemi Badenoch's got a racist bone in her body. I'll say that for her.
No, I don't think she has. And I think if Kemi Badenoch could play it better, and I know that's quite hard at the moment, I think her star would rise.
How's she playing it any worse than Nigel Farage? Sorry.
I don't. Well, she is the leader of the opposition, the official leader of the opposition. There's been a lot of open goals. We've seen Prime Minister's questions as an obvious area where she just doesn't seem to give it that final push, that real kick in the kahunas that you could do. We saw it after the budget, where she was really impressive. But we need more than that. And of course, you're right what you say. You know, we live in an era, this is sort of the era of kind of political and it's sort of fan worship of, you know, certain people, whether they're in the media or in the world of politics, those two areas specifically. Strong voices versus informed voices. And you're talking about Kemi being a more informed voice and Nigel being just a stronger voice, right?
I think Nigel Farage is going to be party sell-by date by the time that election comes.
It's interesting.
You need a younger person to take this country on. She's got all the ideas. He's got none. He's talking about keeping, you know, the two-child cap. We need to cut welfare. We need to give people aspirations. We need to cut taxes. We need to do all these things that Thatcher did. We need to go back to that one. And she's a person who's got strong conviction in her values. And I think that people have got to look again at the Conservatives.
That's a really interesting point. I think it's a great point as well. I mean, that in itself, we could do a 7-hour debate on this, David. I love it. Thank you for raising that actually when it comes to integrity, David's point is that Kemi Badenoch is leaps and bounds ahead of Nigel Farage. I don't think that's misrepresenting what David just said. Leaps ahead. She's the real deal. He's just a louder voice. We live in that world at the moment. You see it online. You see it with commentators. You see it with presidents, where the kind of I don't know. Charlie Kirk is a good example, actually, because those who hate Charlie Kirk and this poor man and father and husband paid with his life for his views, because those on the pathological left decided this guy was essentially some sort of Nazi because the views he had. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard Charlie Kirk and listened to what he says. I have never, ever, and I say this not to be smart, I was listening and watching Charlie Kirk stuff before most people had even heard of Charlie Kirk. I thought this guy is incredibly impressive. The idea that he was some kind of mad Nazi was just so ridiculous. It was such a stupid caricature. It should just be laughable. But of course it wasn't laughable, and he paid with his life. Simultaneously, he's also not Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Mother Teresa. He's a guy with a strong voice, and he speaks with a fluency, and he's compelling, and he was good to look at and amazing to watch. There was something mesmeric about him. So I think he's a kind of good example of the sort of weird world we are in. He had almost a state funeral after he died. The president was there, for goodness sake. That's how big he was seen in that space. But what I thought is that he did a great job of changing the terms of engagement with younger voters. That was really the reason he was kind of, the whole turning point thing became relevant to the last American election, and that's why Trump had so much positivity to say about it. But when I break down what Charlie Kirk says, he throws in some biblical references on a regular basis because he was a Christian, and that's absolutely right that he would do that. That's where he's partly coming from in his arguments. And I thought he was very good. I just didn't think he was the Messiah. But many people did. So you've either got, he's the Messiah, he's a Nazi. You've got this kind of polarity going on. It's absolutely flipping madness. And that's sort of the kind of place we've arrived at. But the strong voices, whether they are informed or not, do sort of prevail. Oh, I like this guy. Why he says it like it is? Yeah, but he hasn't said anything. Yeah, but listen to him talk. Passion. I've been crying out for passion from politicians. I've been saying it for months on this particular subject of Keir Starmer and his hopeless front bench. We need the fire in the belly. We need to hear that meaningful rant. We want to hear a politician say it and mean it. But I don't just want I want that voice to be informed, not just loud and mesmeric and quite addictive. It's got to say something that absolutely intelligently and stands correct in all of its forms under scrutiny. You've got to hear that as well. That's the point I think David was making there. And I get it. I absolutely get it. His point, Kemi Badenoch has more of that than Nigel Farage. The polls say otherwise. Your thoughts, 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, 0344 499 1000. This comes in from Dave in Bristol. As a very simple man, it occurs to me that if Putin is posturing and bragging that he's ready to go to war with Europe, why is he so incessant that Ukraine does not join NATO? It can only be that if Ukraine was in NATO and Putin attacked further, as he will, he would be attacking NATO, including the US. So Trump has to signal his continued involvement and support for NATO to push back on Putin's saber-rattling. That's a really good point. And I thought, actually, Tobias Ellwood is a voice I don't always... really, I mean, we had a couple of on-air, he probably doesn't even remember. I think the last time he was on with me, we had a right old rumble over something or other. However, he was right on the point of, you know, there's got to be a very firm level, in a peace agreement, there's got to be a very firm level of security that actually this isn't going to happen again in a couple, Putin's not going to come back in a couple of years. And that's the reason why the NATO card is played. Whatever was said previously about, you know, these countries, anything that is adjoining or facing Russia will not be a member of NATO, etc. That's a red line. But those days are gone after he invaded Ukraine. I think that's the kind of simple answer on this. 0344 499 1000. Now, let's move to this story. The Ofsted chief, Sir Martin Oliver. Yes, him. You're familiar with Martin Oliver's work. He said that he backs an Australian-style under-16s social media ban, blaming platforms for rising exclusions as well as bad behaviour. From the 10th of December, Australia will require 10 platforms to prevent under-16 accounts, including Snapchat, Meta, TikTok and YouTube. Can this work? Christine Cunliffe is head teacher of LVS Ascot, joins us now. Christine, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Oh, how many times does social media cross your desk on any given week?
Every day, at least once. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's in good faith that, you know, the Australians are doing this, and I think we wish we had an answer to it, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as it seems, because children are very good at navigating systems. So, you know, it'd be interesting to see what happens. Maybe we can take a learning curve from that, maybe see what we could do here, but it's an upward battle. Yeah, it is an upward battle. My little boy started secondary school last September. Couple of weeks in, an email comes from the head teacher, and what had happened basically, it was that we were just talking about Charlie Kirk, and the video of Charlie Kirk's horrendous killing was, of course, all over social media, and somebody was showing it to other kids in the playground or something like that. So, and this video went around to kind of warn about this. The school are doing what they can, but they can't control what happens, you know, when you go out the school gate, etc., when you're on the bus going home. All of these, you'll be more than familiar with all of these dilemmas. And I was kind of shocked. It was the first time as a parent the leap from primary to secondary school is so massive that you forget, you know, we're into proper discussions now, not just about what you're going to do on World Book Day, but this is, you know, the serious stuff. So I was kind of, as a parent, I thought, wow, I've never seen anything like this before. And it made me think. And then my little boy told me that on the coach there was a kid describing, he didn't show a video, describing how somebody was beheaded or something, and all this horrible stuff that is out there. And it could be violence, it could be sexual, it could be profanity, it could be all of the things that, again, you're more than familiar with. And I just don't know how you stop it. It's like it's the dam or the air bubble effect, isn't it? Because you can close off one avenue, but another one sort of opens up. I think parents have got to have those open conversations with their children. It is about dialogue and talking. And schools can do all the education in the world. You can ban mobile phones in school, as you've just said. You can have your online filtering systems. But when you go home, are parents actually putting those monitoring systems in place at home as well? Because the thing is, I've heard through my own children who have thankfully grown up now, that these things, the beheadings, the horrendous things that these kids can see online, I had no idea myself, you know, and to think that young people are accessing that in their own homes where the parents are probably not totally aware of what's going on. So I think it's having those conversations and saying to your children, look, we're protecting you. You shouldn't be seeing things like that. Not at those formative years. That's going to change who you are, who your character's going to be as you grow up. And as parents, we have that responsibility to protect our children from that. But also the governments have got to be seen to be doing something with it as well.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one. There's always a way round. It's a slippery slope, but we've got to protect our kids.
And of course, the issue really is, I mean, social media, of course, is a platform that might, you know, enhance some of this stuff. It might make it more prolific. But actually what we're talking about is the internet, right? I mean, you can't, no one's proposing in Australia to stop the internet. I mean, if you wanted to see something, you know, horrendous or something that the eyes of a kid should not be looking at, whether, you know, sort of adult content in whatever form, then, I mean, the internet will give you that anyway.
It will. If you go looking for it, you're going to find it.
Yeah.
You know, bottom line, you know, so, you know, even as adults, you know, I'm really careful what I put in, but I don't want to see things that I'm never going to forget. I don't, you know, you just don't want to do that. You've got to be so careful with your searches, and the children are naturally curious as they grow up. You know, part of it, you can't blame them in a way. You know, they're being told these things. They're naturally curious, but we've got to try and stop it somehow. But it has to be united front with parents. Parents are the front line here. Check your monitoring systems, check your filters at home, talk to your kids and warn them of the dangers as well.
And you said every day there's sort of issues around this. Is that because, do you experience things that, you know, a pupil has seen or a parent has complained about, or, you know, just something you're aware that's kind of, I mentioned Charlie Kirk, that's doing the rounds? I mean, what does that look like as from a head teacher perspective?
I mean, normally we're flagged up if something's going around, which is particularly nasty. And obviously we've got all the things now about with the use of AI, which is, you know, a huge issue for, you know, fake pictures, videos, the whole lot. There's so much for those children, those poor kids, to navigate at the moment. And we hear on the circuit of really disturbing and deeply upsetting things that are happening to children. And it's trying to find ways in which we can protect them from it. I think it's going to get a lot worse. How we as a government, as a country, are going to try and help navigate this is really tricky.
It really is, isn't it? I mean, the questions come easily. The answers are a little more tricky to work out. Listen, Christine, great to get you on. Thank you. Christine Cunliffe, head teacher at LVS Ascot. It is almost in... I don't. Do you know what? I was on the train going home the other day. I forgot to tell the team this as well. I mean, it was. I don't even know how I should have done it. It was just so, because this is Twitter, right, or X. So when I was, you know, growing up, if you saw Samantha Fox's big toe, that was pornography. You know, it was one of those that back in the day, you might see something that, you know, a ripped out page from Fiesta or some, poor old Dave's going over there. Yeah, I remember Fiesta well. I was a subscriber on a monthly basis. You might see something and think, yeah, oh look, there's something a bit more than a boob. But now, so the other day, Twitter offered up a video. I can't even go to the details, but it was a video filmed in an old folks' home of two elderly people who'd obviously fallen deeply in love, I'd like to think. And they were kind of engaging. I'll just leave it at that. Now, I don't know whether that was some kind of AI thing or not, but the fact that it was on there, the fact that a kid could legally see that. I mean, top shelf stuff was once, it was so taboo, you know, it was either behind glass or it was literally on a top shelf. And again, you might have somehow, some kid at school had a cut-out page of something in a locker. But now, and it's literally everywhere. I don't know how you stop that. I don't know how you stop kids from having any access to it. YouTube is interesting because YouTube do claim that they do have lots of guidance in place, and actually the stuff you get on YouTube is nowhere near what you could find on many other social media outlets. It is 99.9% of the time just showing videos, whether they're documentaries or whether they're just stupid things or video gaming. But you will see content on there that is, you know, quite brutal. The bit I don't get in this debate is why it's not easier to get rid of it from your kid's device. And you can give a child a dumb phone, as it's called. You can make a smartphone into a dumb phone. It's quite convoluted. But of course, you don't want to remove their internet access entirely. A lot of their homework is done online. I mean, my little boy asked to borrow my laptop because it's faster than his iPad, so he can do his homework. His homework literally is online. The instructions for it are online. And so often the actual exercises he's got to carry out are also online. You try getting rid of YouTube on a phone without somebody finding a workaround. Because they say, well, password protect it. Password protect YouTube. So when you go to the app, delete it. Okay, so it's in the App Store now. You need a password but the password is the same password that you open your iPad with. So they've got the password to get it, or your fingerprint, whatever it happens to be. I mean, you should think you should just be able to toggle anything, and that would not be available either in app form or through an internet search engine. But it simply isn't that easy, and in the world of AI, I find that unbelievable. Back to your calls. Graham is in Kent. Gear change here, Graham. Back to the Tories. What are your thoughts?
Well, I listened to David just now, and I don't want to personalise it, but I think that we're forgetting history with this, the Tory party. If we look at Badenoch, she couldn't be bothered to extract us from the number of rules and regulations of the EU. Oh, it was too hard to do. You have the big personalities like Rees-Mogg, Francois, John Redwood. They all say they couldn't control what was going on because of the popular Conservatives.
Yeah.
I almost certainly agree that she's not getting cut through with Starmer. He's got more open goals than the Tottenham defence at the present moment in time, and she's just not getting there. I thought it was a very lukewarm performance she gave today.
Yep.
And the other thing he keeps on mentioning, we have to throw this epithet around about racism. Well, we are going to have to be a little bit racist if we are going to start cutting down people coming into this country and living on benefits.
But that's not racist, is it?
I don't think it is.
It's not racist at all. And one of the problems is that racism, as I think you're correctly alluding to, Graham, has kind of informed the debate. So the minute, it's more so in the past than now, but it's still there. The minute you raise the issue, then somebody shouts, oh, that's a racist thing. You can't say that because it's racist. Some things are racist. They're clearly demonstrably racist. But having a problem with third world, in particular immigration, is not racist. It's just a matter of fact.
It is. And the other thing is that, and I'd like to note this, is that, Farage is being made example of what he said at 13 years old. We don't know what goes on there. But I'm more interested in what Starmer did when he joined the communist commune in Czechoslovakia. What was he learning there? Because that might be a pointer to the future.
Wasn't it a summer job? Like going to Pontins?
I don't know what he was up to.
I have no idea. I thought it was like the equivalent of being a red coat. Well, literally a red coat, maybe. Graham, thank you very much indeed for that. Lynn in Crowthorne says, David, very strong views earlier, David in Essex, with his love for the Conservative policy as comparing to Thatcher, but Kemi is not. Nigel Farage and Reform are. Really look into their policies, not the Guardian smoke. But is it about how you say... I mean, Nigel Farage is a great orator. He's a brilliant speaker. Has Kemi Baden not got more detail in what she says than Farage? This is literally the debate, I suppose. Content over strong voices and compelling, kind of almost addictive voices. I mean, Farage is just brilliant. If you've ever heard him speak, he doesn't have any notes there or anything. He doesn't. That's the way he rolls. Now, that's great, and it has a massive attraction to it. As long as the content is there, right? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk. the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. We are going to be talking to Ian Duncan Smith in the next section as well. It's an interesting story about a British businessman. He's in his 70s, this guy. Has been in jail for the last something like 17 years. He faces a 30-year sentence. This is all shades of, I mean, it just looks horrendous. But why is nothing being done about the story of Ryan Cornelius? Find out more after the news on that. We'll have the voice of doom in just a second. We're going to talk to Martin as well. And this one comes in from Matthew, says, anyone who's contemplating voting for the Tories after 14 years of complete betrayal need their heads examining. But as the saying goes, there's one born every minute. But is it 14 years? That's the thing. They had 5 of those years were in coalition. Another almost 5 of those years was in lockdown. 3 of those years were taken up with Brexit. I don't know if we ever got a straight run at a Conservative administration. That's how it feels to me. But I hear the point, Matthew. Thank you for that. Right, Voice of Doom, day 15, I think it is, Dave, isn't it? Day 15. It is the political mystery voice. Very simple question. Who is this?
Rightly and properly.
15 days. No one's got it right so far. Can you do it today? 87222 if you know who this is.
Rightly and properly.
As ever, if we get a right answer, we will reveal all after the news at 3. One more time.
Rightly and properly.
If you think you know who that is, 87222. Back to your calls on social media. Martin is in Belfast. How you doing, Martin?
Hello, Ian. Long time no speak. I used to be Bracknell, as you remember. I'm now in Belfast. Been here for over 2 years.
Nice.
Ian, I'm prompted to call you because you had a feature just now. I mean, I listen to Julia in the morning and you in the afternoon whenever I can.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about children in playgrounds showing things that really children shouldn't be seeing.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think my headline here is Talk, and also my other very favourite, media programme, GB News. Really, you ought to have someone on from an organisation called Smartphone Free Childhood. Have you heard of Smartphone Free Childhood?
I have, because they're doing stuff around schools and all sorts of things, right? And I think this came up at my boy's last school.
Right, they certainly are. It's started in early 2024. It's a parent phone movement. You know, when you've got statistics like 25% of 5 to 7-year-olds own their own smartphone,
yeah,
and 89% of 12-year-olds also own their own smartphone. Yes, it's a phone, but it's not really a phone, is it? It's a handheld computer with access to the internet 24/7.
Correct.
In your pocket.
Yeah, it really is that. And you can put, you know, on my little boy's phone, we put, you know, there's restrictions. He literally can't get on it unless he's got parental consent. That, of course, causes a few rows.
Kids are very clever. Just a factory reset will remove all those filters.
Of course it will,
I'm very involved locally here, Ian, but it'd be really great if you had someone on who, either one of the founders or one of the national leaders. The whole movement is about getting parents talking together about this problem. And it's not just showing, you know, those sort of things with Charlie Kirk, etc. It's tens and tens of other things that children, and they are children,
should not be seeing.
I don't know how I can facilitate that with talk radio.
Well, we would absolutely. I mean, I'm trying to think if we've had anybody. Remind us again of the name of the organisation you just mentioned, Martin.
It's Smartphone Free Childhood.
Smartphones for Childhood. Yeah.
If you go on Google, there's loads of stuff on there. I've done presentations myself in primary schools and now secondary schools.
Yep.
Obviously, there's a big issue in secondary schools following the pandemic and lockdowns because, that was the only way that lessons in homes could be conducted on some form of device, whether it's an iPad or a smartphone, but quite often a smartphone. We're really trying to persuade parents by talking to each other and realising the harm that having a smartphone. I mean, the whole issue's been sidetracked a bit by the Online Safety Act, because the focus has been very much on that. But there's still a huge issue about age verification.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's easily to bypass if you know what you're doing, isn't it? So even that doesn't work. Listen, Martin, I've got to move because we're about to hit the news. I thank you for that. But yeah, Smartphone Free Childhood. Look them up, Google them, have a look, and I'm sure we will speak to them at some point. Thank you to Martin in Belfast. We'll come back to that subject. More calls from you. If you're a parent, you know what that feels like. How do you deal with smartphone issues around that? Voice of Doom, will we have a winner? Can you identify this voice? Or can you identify,
rightly and properly,
that voice? We did it, Dave. We did it. Seamless. We'll find out after the news. 87222. Let's get the headlines now at 2 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Continuing to take your calls, the sounding board of the nation, the home of common sense. Vladimir Putin, of course, yesterday warning that Russia is ready to go to war with Europe. It's an extraordinary intervention, accusing European leaders of sabotaging the US-Russian peace talks. Is he in a different stratosphere when he speaks in this way? Or does he really mean business? Could Europe conceivably win a war with Russia? Well, probably collectively, but hopefully we don't go down that territory. What do you make of what is going on? Also, as I mentioned just before the news, a British businessman, Ryan Cornelius, has been jailed in Dubai since 2008. He actually is on a 30-year sentence, keeping him behind bars until 2038. He was ordered to repay $432 million over a disputed loan, a charge he denies, as do many of those around him. We'll have details on that. We'll speak to Ian Duncan-Smith in just a moment. And in other news, from 2028, the electric vehicle excise duty will mean that there will be charges of 3p per mile for pure EVs and 1.5p for plug-in hybrids, regardless of types of fuel. So you'll be paying twice if you've got a hybrid, if I've read that correctly. Details to come, everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. And of course, you can message 87222. We'll bring you the voice of doom. Hopefully, we've got a winner. We'll do that shortly. But first, back to this story that I referenced at the beginning. British businessman Ryan Cornelius, who's 71, has been in jail in Dubai since 2008. So this 30-year sentence means that he'll be behind bars until 2038. And it's all over a loan, or an alleged loan, of £432 million. This is a disputed situation. It's something he emphatically denies. Dubai Islamic Bank, that is central to the case, they're on track to make billions in profits this year, while the United Nations have called the detention of Ryan arbitrary. I think that's probably putting it mildly when you look at the details. Let's speak with Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, Conservative MP, former Conservative Party leader, of course. Sir Ian, good afternoon to you. We're struggling to hear you. Is that a mute button issue, or is it our end? We will.
Can you hear me
now? We can hear you loud and clear, Ian, now. Yeah, thank you for being with us. This is one of those stories, of course, that has been around but not made lots of headlines. For those that cared to look, it was there. But it's absolutely extraordinary what has happened to this man. Can you give us some of the details on what's happened to Ryan Cornelius?
Yeah, Ryan Cornelius was a businessman, basically a property developer. He and some partners had managed to get a lease on some land in Dubai, which they were going to develop. That was the whole plan. They got hit at the start of it by the global crash some 18 years ago at the time, and they had to restructure their loan. When they did this, just after that, the Dubai Bank, I think with the new chairman who was part of the royal family there, foreclosed on the loan and said that he was guilty of fraud. He was then taken to court. And interestingly enough, the first judge dismissed the case on the basis that there was no evidence or insufficient evidence to even prosecute the case. So what then the bank did was moved again with a new rule, the new prosecution based on theft from the Dominion of Dubai or something on those orders. And then they gave him, the judge then at that case, gave him a whole bunch of years actually. And what they did was another thing called the Dubai Law 37, which while he was still in prison, they instigated that, and that basically has given him, essentially turns out at the moment to be a life imprisonment charge. All of this on a disputed loan. And what happened to the piece of land, I hear you saying?
Yeah.
Well, the piece of land was subsequently possessed, obviously, by the Dubai Bank. And the Dubai Bank is, I'm told, the latest estimates are from the sale of the properties that were developed and are being developed, I understand, on there, is worth over £3 billion.
Wow.
So what we're dealing with here, I think, is quite clearly an attempt by a bank and or an individual, there is some dispute about that, to make sure that they have the money that will come from this, but at the same time, having trashed his life and thrown him into prison, they are not inclined to let him out. Now, I've just written a letter with a lot of MPs, well over between 100 and 200 MPs, all basically saying that the authorities should release him now, no matter what, on the basis that their National Day was on the 2nd of December. We gave that in to the embassy. The embassy has no doubt transferred it across to the ruling family, and we haven't had an answer back. And we are past the December the 2nd, and so his family, who are now beginning, they've been for some time living in very straitened circumstances. They have no money. All his property was seized, his personal property as well. And he's never going to be released. That at least appears to be the plan. Well, the UN has called this out and said it was a wrongful arrest and prosecution. Everybody in the West has said so. The problem is the British government, over a period of time, trying to get money out of the Middle East, particularly out of the United Arab Emirates, which includes Dubai and also Abu Dhabi, they've been rather reticent about bringing it forward too often. So I had to have a big row with the new Foreign Secretary then, which was Lord Cameron, and he listened and he said, yeah, we're going to raise it. And he was very good. He raised it and kept raising it, and they were not happy about it. And since then, we have support from the Labour Party, and the then Foreign Secretary, when he arrived, the new one, David Lammy, I understand at his first meeting didn't even raise it. We've since managed to get it raised, but the real problem is, the British government seems to want investment from the Middle East, particularly, I suspect, Abu Dhabi, although they're not party to this. This is a Dubai issue, but it's part of the United Arab Emirates, and there's a desire not to upset them too much, I fancy, in the Foreign Office, who can always be recommended to get it wrong when it comes to British citizens held abroad. So we're still campaigning. I am chairman of the Magnitsky Sanctions Group. I'm calling for sanctions on those that have actually arrested him. It's the only way you'll get to them at the end of the day is to make sure they can't move from where they live, that all their ill-gotten gains in this particular instance will not be usable elsewhere, because America would follow suit. Other countries would be threatened to do. That's the key to this, is to say you cannot behave like this. It's outrageous. This poor man has been 17 years and no sight whatsoever of a chance to be released. And of course, the reason they don't want to release him is because he will tell everybody what happened.
Yeah.
But he said he won't do it as long as he can be released.
And that's interesting. I mean, as you rightly said, Ian, there's lots of, sadly, around the world, prisoners abroad. There's been TV shows banged up abroad, these kind of things. Lots of documentaries on different people that have found themselves under certain, rather strict and slightly unconventional, shall we say, regimes, as I think we can fairly say this one is. And they've found themselves almost sucked into a legal case, not of their own making, and there they are. Even if they do get some kind of justice in the end, they've often spent many, many years in jail. You'd think it would be a straightforward case when it comes to international diplomacy, that a Home Secretary, a Foreign Secretary, and of course a Prime Minister, and we've had maybe half a dozen, possibly more, since 2008, when Ryan was first jailed, that it would be a case of being able to sort of have a quiet word in their shell, like, as the phrase goes. But that clearly doesn't do it.
No, it hasn't this way, and I think it's because of quite a lot of personal involvement in this from what it appears like, as I understand it, a member of the ruling family there. And I think that's deplorable. As I say, the first case was thrown out. They again brought up another bogus case, and that gave him 10 years. And he's been now 17 years in because they brought in a new law. And they tried it under that, which is a thing called Dubai Law 37, which basically allows them to do what they like, as far as I can make out. And so he's gone way past the 10 years, and he's still there. And his family haven't seen him. His child has grown up, hasn't seen him. It's a shocking case because it's so wrong. It's against everything that we believe in this country, and we do business with these people, but we have to say to them, look, you can get stuffed. We're not going to do business with you if you carry on like this, because you can't be trusted. How can we trust you to leave other business people who come over there to invest in you? And I would say to all people investing or getting involved with Dubai, don't.
Is there as far as you know, Ian, you've been in government, you're an experienced parliamentarian, is there a kind of an edict in the Foreign Office or elsewhere that sits down at a sort of for your eyes only type meeting and says, look, this is a terrible case for Mr. Cornelius. However, we've got X amount of billion quid's worth of deals with these people. We don't want to jeopardise that. So, sad as it is, we have to sort of tell the noble lie that we are, yes, we're aware of it. It's terrible what's happened. But actually, on balance, we as a country need to keep the deal more than we need to release Mr. Cornelius. Is something as covert as that? Does that go on?
I couldn't possibly comment except to say you aren't far off the truth. What actually happens, and you can see it here, is that, you know, at the last moment the Foreign Office will say, well, you know, and the Treasury will go, do we really need to upset them? We need the investment. You know, and my answer is this is what Magnitsky sanctions are there for.
Correct.
You don't have to target the whole government if you don't want to. You target those who created this problem, who seized his property and have basically made sure that he was imprisoned. Target them with very deliberate personal sanctions to the extent that they cannot then leave with their wealth, and they might as well stick it where the sun don't shine, frankly, because it's going to be of no use to them. That's what Magnitsky sanctions do.
Yeah.
They scare off these kind of oligarch-type characters to realize that actually they'll become pariahs outside their country and they will never be able to travel or spend any money there. That seems to me the only way to deal with countries that do this, that treat individual human rights so badly. We shouldn't be doing that business with them. And my recommendation to the government is get tough with them.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised how much they'll eventually bend on this if you say, we don't want you to invest in our country, you can take your money somewhere else, and by the way, we're going to make life very difficult for you going forward, okay? Dubai is not a country that has massive oil wealth. It relies very much on its neighbor in the UAE. So my point is individual sanctions work, and we should be doing them now. That's the way to do it.
Sir Ian, thank you for your time as ever. We'll keep an eye on this story as well. Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, Conservative MP, former Conservative Party leader, of course. I don't know how many cases there are like this around the world, probably dozens in various forms. If you ever watch Banged Up Abroad and those kind of shows, you'll be familiar with the sort of drill of what happened. Some iffy court, a friend of mine, oddly, who was on Banged Up Abroad, found himself done for smuggling gold. And the chief of police, and he said it was like out of a sitcom, the chief of police at the airport that arrested him said, you're going to have to go to court in the morning. And he turns up to court, and the judge is the chief of police, the same bloke, just like changed his wig. And there he was presiding over the thing, and he thinks, that's terrible. I've been sentenced to, I think it was 5 years in jail. He turns up at the prison, and the prison governor's the same bloke. You know, it's like it's pretty much the same deal all across the thing. It was, he eventually came out after about a year. It's an interesting story. But there's loads of those, and a case such as this, it is absolutely horrific. And this 71-year-old man, he was obviously worth a few quid once upon a time, doing rather well, subject to what looks like some really iffy dealings in Dubai, and found himself jailed in total, well, 30 years. He's going to be there till 2038. He's currently 71 years of age. So another 13 years on top of that. You can see this is going to be a man in his mid-80s. Before he's considered for release. His life is shattered. Extraordinary. Back to your calls. This is Ian in Bridgend. We'll reference Russia and the media and more. Ian, good afternoon to you.
Hello, Ian. Yeah,
Hi.
Russia, all over again, isn't it? It's,
indeed. What's going on?
That's right, yeah. No, it's just crazy. Well, I think, as we spoke recently, it's all just that the warmongering continues, as nobody wants to see a peaceful end to this. I think there's just too much money to be made out of it by too many vested interests.
Yeah.
But, you know, Russia just seem to be going ahead now. You know, this is the last chance saloon in many respects, because otherwise they'll be dictating terms, won't they? I know it's not going straightforward with Trump and Witkoff, isn't it? It's all looking a bit
yeah, and of course, you know, my sense of this, and I might be wrong, Ian, is that Trump doesn't really care. And when I say that, I don't mean in a grossly irresponsible manner. He just wants it to go away, doesn't he? He wants it to go away, so he can say, right, we've solved that. He couldn't really give a hoot if Ukraine have to give, you know, part of the eastern regions back to the Russians, or to the Russians. And Russia aren't going to in any way walk away unless they've got some of that land. Because we can talk about a 28-point plan, but there's only the one real point in that plan is about land.
That's it, yes. You know, the concern, as you say, with Trump, he's all about the deal, isn't he? All about making a football about it.
Of course he is.
My fear is, you know, the way the EU are continually stirring the pot with NATO. You know, they're trying to get these Russian assets now. That's their latest. They're putting pressure on Belgium to release the Russian assets. I think Belgium said, yeah, we go along with it, but don't expect us to carry the can when the various authorities in the world come calling and Russia starts asking where's the money gone?
Yeah, where has the money? Yeah, it's all
about the money, and that's the most distasteful aspect. All these poor innocent people, and they just markers on an account book. It needs to end. Project Ukraine needs to come to an end as soon as possible, so we can get back to a bit of normality.
Yeah, I like it. I like your thinking. Ian, thank you very much indeed for that. Becky says, I just laughed my socks off listening to Tobias Elwood, who was with us in the first hour. Of course, Russia are the aggressors and the war must be stopped. But the thought of Keir Starmer as one of the many hapless and incompetent European leaders saying enough is enough and they will take over from the Americans achieving anything of any note is for a comedy club stage, not for the political arena. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly how we see it. If you took every single leader on the European continent, from Spain to Germany to the UK, does the might of that collective cut any teeth in this particular scenario? Darren in Lincoln, if we went to war with Russia, they would just send a message to all the illegal immigrants that we already have here, and they would turn on us. Europe has millions of people from the Middle East roaming around who are all potential terrorists, so Russia has probably already got them in place to do all sorts of mayhem. Their actual Russian army doesn't need to do anything. More coming up from you in a few moments' time. 0344 499 1000. Oh, the voice of doom. Yeah, voice of doom. Have we got a winner? Let's find out, shall we? Remember, before the news, we played you this voice. Here it is.
Rightly and properly.
Can we hear that again, Dave?
Rightly and properly.
Rightly and properly. It's gone on for 15 days, this. These are some of the guesses. Enoch Powell. It is not. I kind of get that, but it's not. Alec Douglas. Isn't there a name missing there? Hume, I think. Alec Douglas Hume, no. Francis Pym, no. Nick Rainsford, no. Roy Jenkins, no. No winner. It rolls over to tomorrow. Yes, day 16, Voice of Doom. It is back. 3:20 now on Talk.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. Chrissy says, stop. Oh, I did read that at the beginning. Apologies. This from Simon, who says about 50% of that you ascribe to Putin. That was about the kind of country that he runs, a dictator, authoritarian, cares nothing about the Russian people, solely obsessed with being a global powerhouse, expanding the territory, killing people, complaining when his enemy get upset, killing journalists, beating the life out of dissenters, imprisoning politicians who oppose him. Anyway, it was all of that. Simon says about 50% of that could be ascribed to Starmer. Keep up the... Yeah, I don't know about all of it, but yeah, I mean, there might be bits about the idea that he spends a lot of time, probably more in a global capacity than he does in a domestic one. Keep up the good work. P.S. We wouldn't win a war because no one would fall in line with Starmer. Yeah, I don't think we could do it on our own if we had to. But the might of the entire continent of Europe, which is sort of central to the question. Mark's in Lincolnshire. Mark, what have you got for us? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Hiya.
Hi, mate. Yeah, basically, I wasn't going to call you today, but I heard another caller ring up.
Yeah.
Tory boy. That was banging on about
Tory boy.
Tory boy. Well, I don't dislike the guy or anything. I actually feel quite sad about people like him. They're so locked into voting Tory, or even if they're a lefty voting Labour, they can't see any other option, any other alternative. So it kind of becomes irrelevant what the Tories are offering, because they see that as the only option, because everything else is a bit too scary. You know, because he was essentially just parroting the narrative, the establishment narrative, you know, bringing up the racism thing about reform, bringing up, you know, this spy thing or whatever he was going on about. It's basically every single establishment talking point, isn't it, at the end of the day?
But I think his overall point, though, Mark, was that, you know, don't buy into, you know, this reform frenzy. The Tories are still the real deal. Nigel Farage isn't. I think that's what he was saying. And he then listed a load of things that have, you know, Farage or Reform have been accused of as evidence as to why, you know, all that glitters isn't gold, or whatever the phrase is.
Yeah, but that kind of just proves what I was saying anyway, Ian, because he's, as I said, you know, he's locked into this idea of the Tories. He will always view any kind of alternative as being obviously not the Tories, so he's going to view them with a bit of dubiousness, shall we say. You know, he'll always be a bit dubious about it.
Yeah.
He'll always be looking for the reason why he can just vote Tory, because this is the mental attitude that they have at the end of the day. You know, they can't understand, you know, that these two parties, Labour and Tory, as you know, I mentioned his name earlier when I rang up initially, and I can't remember his blooming name now. You know, the two cheeks of the same you know what, because they essentially are. The reason they let the country down for 14 years is because they just essentially picked up from where Blair and that lot left off.
But the sort of deeper argument on that will go, well, actually, for the first 5 years, it was coalition. And it came right off the back of a global meltdown under which no government was ever going to do anything massively positive in the financial arena, because there was nothing to be positive about. So you've got to remove 5 years, then you've got to remove this is the kind of Tory argument, then you've got to remove the COVID years, because nothing could happen then either.
Yeah, but they still didn't, that was still never an excuse to, you know, just keep ramping up the immigration thing, for example.
No, I agree. I mean, that's the greatest example, if you like, of the kind of continuation and the groupthink of the two main parties.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, the whole thing, you know, you look at Cameron, the stuff he was coming out with, you know, in secret, you know, secret recordings of him that have leaked since. You know, the point I'm kind of making really is that, you know, for people like him, you know, as I say, you know, I don't particularly dislike him. He's going to vote how he votes for the reasons he wants to at the end of the day. But they can't see that, you know, everything's shifted. Because even on the left, you've got the Greens coming up.
Yeah.
Well behind Labour, you know, but getting very close to Labour now. And, you know, this is what's happening with Reform. And I'm no fan of Reform. I'm no fan of Farage. You know, I'm a UKIP member at the end of the day. So, you know, at the end of the day, people are en masse are seeing that things need to change. The two parties, Labour and Conservative, they've been running the show for so long. They're just tired. They haven't really got anything different to offer. Yeah. They've just got slight variations on what each other does, basically.
I hear it. No, I hear it, and I can. It's a completely valid argument about how we need to sort of recalibrate how we do business. I guess the question is, for our previous caller as well, Mark, is Nigel Farage the man to do it? He thinks not. Listen, Mark, I've got to move to get more voices on. Thank you for that. 0344 499 1000. Social media plays a huge part as well, which we often refer to, which is not as far as the argument we were having before about kids and social media. That's a whole separate thing. But getting your news from social media and following certain kind of heroes that have been on there for years, and it doesn't take much to build up hundreds of thousands of followers if you stick to a narrative, post regularly, whether you're left wing or right wing. I'm thinking about Marina on the left, and there's some obvious examples on the right. You keep it up, you keep it up, you keep it up. And what you have to keep in mind when you see all that stuff is that you're watching a polemic, you're watching someone's opinion. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. In fact, let me just say this loud and clear, I think it's fantastic that people have the conch to be able to say, I can say what I want, I can get it out to the world, and you'll have people support you. What you have to keep in mind is that it's not the news, and that's where it all gets a bit foggy. So when it comes to who we want to vote for, we often vote through the prism of stuff that has been seen in areas such as social media, which is something we didn't have before. It sort of built a frenzy where people plant their flags and pick their team. And that was never the case before. And I think that has fueled much of what we're talking about in terms of the divide. It's also brilliantly exposed some of it. That doesn't mean that everybody's got an opinion is wrong. It does depend on where you sit. But there's not a day goes past when somebody says, why aren't you talking about this? And they send me a clip of someone. And I think, well, because it's not true. It's just a bloke's opinion. Some of it might be true. It might be a little bit of it. But I can't corroborate it. I can't stand it up, which is the journalistic phrase. So that's why we're not talking about it. It's a person giving a really good rant on a video, and it's got, you know, tens or hundreds of thousands of followers, but it's not true. It's an opinion. But you know that 2 million people have now seen this video, whatever it happens to be, and therefore there's going to be a group of those people who say, yeah, that's what I believe because it appeals to what I like to think, and I will vote accordingly of whichever party is nearer to this, whether it's the Green Party on one side or the Reform Party on another. You see this happening in real time all over the place. So it's kind of monkeyed around with our appetites, if you like. James is in Kent. We've not got long, James, but I'm sure you can do it. Back to Nigel Farage. What are your thoughts?
Ian, good afternoon. James.
Afternoon.
We spoke on this, I think, about this time last year.
We did.
When it comes to divvying out deals, the only time for that is on election night when all the numbers are in.
Correct.
Prior to that, all it would do is dissipate and really miss people off about, you know, which side of the fence they're on. You promise this, you promise that. Now, you said earlier something about what's it going to look like, what's the gut, what's the belly of the beast, how are they going to do it? Yeah. And I remember when Thatcher won the Tory leadership, she had ideas, but remember Keith Joseph? It was him who guided her, so you could say he was the foundation. Now, what I think Farage and Ticey and all the gang are going to do, their first number one objective, like Thatcher had with the unions, will be the civil service. They've got to crack that one. They've got to get in there and tell them, you answer the government, you do as you're told, you're not going to block anything. Unless they do that, the reform dream is over, and I think they know that. So that's their number one task when they get in, and everything then
given the advice they seek, because they're all newbies, we know, they need to lean on experience. From that, they'll start building blocks on getting the economy back on track. Sure. But they have to do the civil service first. Otherwise, we're all in the same oblivion to nowhere.
Yeah, it's a great point. James, thank you very much indeed. That is, I hope that is the top of the to-do list of the next government. And if it's a reform one, I think there's more chance that it is. And it means, by the way, probably a programme that's going to take forever, because you're not talking about changing. I mean, you know, the idea that the civil service is full of ineptitude, full of sort of mad, raving lefties is just not true. The problem is there are some in there, and the ones that are in there have a powerful, strong voice. What happens in the civil service, left or right, is they like an easy life, the path of least resistance. So that's why you get this groupthink and things don't change, and the status quo is preferable than going through, you know, 5 or 10 years of reforming or changing a policy that might be tricky. Well, yeah, tricky for the people who've got to deal with it, i.e. the civil servants. That was the whole thing with Brexit. It wasn't that they were all Remainers. It was that, like, really? You're going to give us this amount of work to do over the next 10 years? 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. Back with more from you coming next. And we are going to talk about what it means, by the way, for your car and taxation, especially if you've got a hybrid car. Details coming next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 25 to 4. As you will be aware, from 2028, the electric vehicle excise duty kicks in. It means you'll be charged 3p per mile for pure EVs and 1.5p for plug-in hybrids, regardless of the type of fuel. Meanwhile, it's been revealed that the government is considering alcohol interlocks in all UK cars, devices that prevent starting a car if alcohol is detected. This is an attempt to target, well, lots of areas of drink driving, particularly this time of year when people go to a Christmas party. Get a taxi, you weirdos. Let's speak with Nick Freeman, lawyer and road safety campaigner. Nick, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Nick.
What's jumped out at everybody, I suppose, in this new taxation of per mile is that I guess if you're in a hybrid car, because you pay road tax, right, if you're in a hybrid car?
You pay road tax and you also pay fuel duty.
And
so,
fuel duty. And
yeah,
now 3p. So you're being hit all over the place here.
1.5p a mile. So the point is, a hybrid is basically a conventional engine with a very small battery. Typically, it'll do 20, 30 miles on the battery.
Yep.
So they fill up with their petrol. It's typically petrol. They're paying their fuel duty as they fill up, a significant amount. And they're now being tapped for a 1.5p per mile for a tax that comes in 2028. That's when they're going to start being tapped, which to me it's mean. It will disincentivize people. There's already to put hybrid cars into perspective, 1 in every 10 cars being purchased at the moment is hybrid because it's a stepping stone to going all electric, which is obviously something that's welcomed. So we don't want to disincentivize people. And we've got a sort of a slight contradiction at the moment because, as you may be aware, the government, if you're going to buy an electric car under £37,000, you will get a grant. You will be eligible for a grant of £3,750. But at the same time, you're then going to be charged 3p a mile for every mile you use. So I think what the government ought to be doing is not even discussing this at the moment, because the forecast for car production is good. We want to keep it good. And the last thing we want to do at the moment is disincentivize anyone who's thinking about moving across from saying, actually, I'm going to get I'm going to buy another conventional car. An internal combustion engine car before I actually go down this road. We don't really want that. It was going nicely, and I think this could be a hiccup.
Have they established, as far as you know, Nick, how they're going to measure the mileage that you do? I mean, they ruled out sort of surveillance by sticking a black box or something in your car. How is that going to work?
I don't know whether it's going to be something on like an MOT certificate, or whether they're going to use cameras, some sort of technology to detect your car. Big Brother, wherever you go, your mileage is being measured. For me, the easy answer is a black box. And there are huge benefits of black box. Of course, it's an intrusion into your rights, but there's huge benefits from a road safety perspective. So the honest answer is I don't know, and they haven't told us how they're going to do it.
No, they haven't. And it's quite a crucial detail that you might, bearing in mind the concerns over things like privacy. A word, if you would, Nick, on this other story of these auto locks for alcohol detection in cars. They do exist in some places. I think you can possibly get one fitted or something of that nature, but this to be a sort of compulsory in all cars in the UK. Do they work? Is this a good idea? On the face of it, it sounds like a no-brainer.
Yeah, I'd agree. On the face of it, it sounds like a no-brainer. There's always this right of, is this too much interference? We do have the highest drink driving tolerance of any country, certainly in Western Europe. That needs to be reduced to make our roads safer. My view would be I would install them as anybody who's convicted of drink driving, it should be part of the punishment. You have the lock installed. And then I would see how we go from there. Obviously, we want to make our roads safer. To be quite honest with you, drink driving is nowhere near as prevalent as drug driving, which is largely untouched. So, yes, in principle, it's a good idea. I would just do it for people who are convicted at the moment and measure it, get some proper figures to see whether it works. It's going to add expense to cars, and, I don't know how it's going to... Basically, what you're asking every driver to do is do a breathalyzer test before they get in the car.
That's how it works, isn't it? You blow into something and your car won't start if it detects alcohol on your breath.
Well, yes, and it's measured. It's not just any alcohol. It's obviously measured. And, if it will be very useful for sort of people who've consumed alcohol the night before, who feel perfectly all right and actually have still got an excess amount in their bodies. So it's a move to safety. It's probably a good idea, but I think it should run in conjunction with other measures, and one of those must be reducing the limit.
That would be a sensible way forward. Nick, thank you as ever. Great to see you again as well. Nick Freeman, the lawyer and road safety campaigner. Thank you to him. More from you on the way. Comments coming in as well. Reese says, totally agree with the caller David. I'm in a similar position. A Tory who thought about joining Reform, but he's hit the nail on the head about Farage being past his sell-by date by the next election. Is Zia Youssef Reform's answer? Gaining a lot of traction online, well-spoken and informed. He comes across as better than Farage. I mean, that's going to be a genuine debate. As politicians get a little older, it hasn't stopped Donald Trump. I mean, the last American election was between two men both in their late 70s. Out of the entire population of America, two blokes, 78 years of age, something of that nature, standing for president. Age shouldn't matter, by the way. It shouldn't matter, because the obvious overarching argument is, well, yeah, you're older, you're more experienced. In some cultures, that would be a dead cert for you to stand. But of course, it depends on your state of mind and your fitness levels to a degree. You know, do you look like you've got fire in your belly? You could go for a jog round the block if you had to. If you needed to kick a ball towards a goal, even if it didn't go in, you could do. I don't know. All of those things, you've got to look fresh and energetic, regardless. And it's interesting when you look at, when Trump and Biden were battling it out against each other before he had to drop out. I mean, Biden looked about 25 years older than Donald Trump. I mean, it was an extraordinary difference. And you look at Trump, and he's one of those guys, you know he's an older man, but there's something about him that doesn't look like an older man. I'll tell you what I saw on the telly yesterday. This is a separate point. You never thought you'd hear this in the same sentence. Mary Berry. Did you know this, Alicia? Mary Berry is 90, and she was on some cooking show. Not only did she look unbelievable, she sounded great. There was no age to her voice, as there sometimes almost inevitably is. She just sounded brilliant. And it's that kind of vibe that you sort of need from a... So it doesn't... And that's what Trump kind of has. It goes back to Trump, this. I wasn't going to talk about cakes and pies. Trump had that and still has that kind of sense that, yes, he does, if you look closely, he's clearly a bloke that could be in his 70s, but there's a life about him. He doesn't look tired, doesn't look knackered. He doesn't look away with the fairies. And sadly, Biden, and I'm sure he was probably ill, kind of hits all of those, hit all of those buttons that went very much against him. Grace is down in London. Grace, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I was just thinking about this earlier today before you started asking about whether or not we could succeed in a war against Russia.
Yeah.
And I am really ignorant about military matters. I don't know at all enough about the answer to that question on a military front. But it was just in my mind earlier that when we had the world wars here, people all came together and there was a war effort.
Yep.
And in addition to the people who so bravely went and risked their lives, and I just can't get my head around the bravery of those people, also people here, still within Britain, worked together and they put up with rationing. I mean, now we have people complaining even if you restrict adverts for junk food. People put up with their food being rationed. They worked hard to provide supplies that were needed, and, you know, had to do all kinds of things they might not necessarily want to do because there was a war effort. And I think one of the values that we've lost in our country is that kind of sacrificial aim. We're not good.
Yeah, I mean, there was a kind of a collective. But I suppose, I mean, the answers to that, I guess, Grace, are obvious, and that is that we don't live in the 1930s and the 40s. We live in a far more instant gratification society. We live in a society with social media. We live in a society where people have their own entrepreneurial ideas. They want to own their own home, their own car. All of this stuff was distant dream territory. And we also live in an era where we don't trust politicians as much as we once did. So all of that put together kind of scuppers that, and I share that nice romantic view. You know, when I hear, I used to talk to my mum about, you know, she remembers the tail end of it all as a kid. There was something about that. There was a sort of social cohesion that just naturally kicked in by being at war.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear people saying how we've lost Christian values in this country, I think it's not simply that we've got more religious diversity. I don't think that's the real problem. I think the ideas that we did have about, you know, Jesus taught that we should do for others what we'd like done for ourselves. He demonstrated self-sacrifice. In place of that, we've had more and more kind of commercialism and the idea that we need to get more stuff for ourselves. And we've been kind of conditioned by advertising all around us all the time. So I think just think more about what we want for ourselves. And in addition, like you said, people are less trusting. I think that people just wouldn't trust what the government instructed them to do if there were a war. But it seems such a shame. And yeah, I think about some of the things that my grandmother used to talk about during the war and how she would, as a little girl, go and help with the cows and things like that because they all needed to put their hands to the pump. And then she was also really appreciative when the war ended of things that we now take for granted because they'd had rationing, whereas I think we lack some enjoyment now from the everyday things that seem normal to us, but which a few generations ago people were having to kind of restrict because they were all doing their bit and giving up what they needed to help with the war. And if there were a war now, I don't think it would work so well.
It's interesting, the rationing thing. I mean, what that would have done to the sense of... I don't know, there's others... You could bring in... There's so much into this conversation, isn't there? You know, I'm always telling my little boy about being on time, because I think being on time is simply polite. It's almost as simple as that. And the laws of knock-on effects. And, you know, we had all manner of shenanigans last night when he was trying to do his French homework. 9:15, he's still doing his French homework. Should have been not just in bed, but asleep by 9. And, of course, he wasn't happy about the fact that I kept saying, you know, have you done it? Are you nearly there, etc. And I try to explain that the knock-on effect of that doesn't just affect him. He says, well, it doesn't matter, does it? Because, like, when I'm asleep, I might as well be doing my homework as being asleep. It's almost a waste of my time. And I was thinking, but I've got things to do, and if somebody else has something to do, then that has a knock-on effect. And I think people were more aware and more polite back then. So it is sort of connected, all this stuff, because there was just a sense that you had a certain social responsibility, which many people still have, but just not enough of them. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think so. And like I say, I blame a lot on commercialism, and that's not to blame any one individual, but people then weren't surrounded in the same way that we are now by advertising. And advertising tells us you should get this thing that you want, because that's how they make their money, by convincing the customer that they're always right and the customer should always get what they desire. And so we're kind of gradually, without noticing it, being fed this message to just go after what we want and think that we're entitled to what we want. Whereas previously, people might have more awareness of other people around them, rather than being manipulated into thinking that we're just entitled to whatever we feel like. And I just feel like that's had a kind of a corrosive impact on aspects of our society.
Yeah, I like it. Grace, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, the glory days, it's always the classic, you know, what era would you go back to? Would you go back to the Victorian era? Well, great if you had a few quid, but absolutely horrific if you didn't. And I think that about wartime stuff, you know, you didn't have central heating in most homes, even, you know, back in the 40s and stuff like that. But of course, what you didn't have, you weren't aware you didn't have. The idea that you didn't go on foreign holidays wasn't that weird, because really nobody went on foreign holidays. You just didn't jump on a jet and nip over for a Beano in Benidorm. Didn't kind of happen. But there was a certain innocence about all of that. And I think that's, again, just to bring my own kids back into this, they were writing their Christmas list the other day. And, of course, they wanted to look at Amazon so they could have a look. And I said, well, I'm not sure that's a good idea, because once you're in there, you're in the flipping jungle of toys and gifts. I mean, you could be there forever. What is it you're actually hoping Father Christmas brings you? And it was that kind of sense. And I remember as a kid wanting a microscope for Christmas. I think it was probably about, I don't know, 11, 12 or something. And there was a little shop in our town, in Ashford. I can't remember the name of it for the life of me. It was on the corner of Bank Street and the Ring Road, and it was a camera shop. And it's mostly specialised in cameras, but it also sold telescopes and microscopes. And it was always quite mesmerising, and it was opposite the old market. And when we used to walk past it as a kid, I was quite sort of fascinated by all of these, you know, lovely lenses and cameras that were in the window. And that was where I first saw the microscope. I thought, that's amazing. And each time I'd walk past it, I'd have a look in, and I'd put it on the Christmas list. And it kind of brought a slight tear to my eye when my kids were going, yeah, can I have a look at Amazon, please? And they were looking at the remote control this and computerise that and game this. And it seemed so instant, the joy that there was back then. But of course they don't know any different, and I didn't know any different then, so it's all relative in that respect. They're not hankering for the days when you can walk past a camera shop and spot a flipping microscope in the window. And of course I'm not hell-bent on the idea that I have to look at Amazon 24 hours a day in order to find out what I want. So it's a kind of strange time. We do look back, and were there more ideal times, purer times when it was just a little more polite and simple, I think, is probably the word. Very simple. What we didn't have, we didn't know we had. And if you spoke to somebody in the 1800s, they would tell you about that of the people in the 16 or 1700s. And it'll go back to flipping Socrates again. 0344 499 1000. That is our number. That is where we're at. Lots to get through here. This is Talk.
the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I have been reminded since my trip down memory lane about the innocence of Christmas and mooching around town centres, looking through windows, and the gifts that you might want, sort of almost Home Alone style, what twinkles and sparkles in the shop window. And then Dave, our technical operator, for the first time in the show, actually woke up, which was a revelation in itself. He reminded me of what I did forget to mention. Of course, there was our own Amazon. And that was either the Argos or the Kays or the Littlewood catalogue. When that beast arrived, you did. If you got the Littlewoods or the Kays ones, of course, you didn't keep them. They got passed around. You had them for a couple of days, and then another neighbour had one, and then some woman used to come around and take your orders or something of that nature. But yeah, seeing that Christmas section in the back, oh my goodness, that was enough to just absolutely the best. Daniel is in Epsom. Daniel, we've not got long, but I know you can do it. What have you got for us?
Ian, hi mate. I think once reform stormed to power, right, and we have our immigration system under control, we've stopped the boats, and we've deported about 1.5 illegal immigrants that are already here, I think the next big topic moving forward is going to be freedom. And what I mean by that is I've noticed that over the last 20 years, who agreed that we all have to drive at 20 miles an hour now, right? Yeah. Nobody agreed it, but we all are in London, and you can't drive more than 20 miles an hour. You can't go down this road between this time and this time, otherwise you'll get a fine.
Yeah.
You can't. There's an LTN in the middle of this road. I'm in Epsom. I'm in Epsom, and there's a clean air zone, right?
Yeah.
Up to, if you had an older car, they would come in for you for that. You've got the congestion charge.
All of that caper.
Yeah, we are born free in this country, okay?
Yeah, should be.
We are born free. When I was a kid, you used to say, it's free country, right? Yeah. But it's not anymore. And, like, little things like, oh, if you go into the bank and you ask for $5,000 cash or whatever it is, and they go, what's it for? It's none of your business.
Yeah, that's right. What's it for? Why do you need to know?
It's nothing to do with you.
So that's a brilliant revolution that we need to happen. I mean, whether the 1.5 million illegal thing happens, I mean, because I think that's going to be as tricky as recalibrating the civil service. I love that idea, Daniel, that we are going to move into an era of freedom where we just get back the basics. Because you're right, all that stuff. And Daniel, thank you. I've got to move. Good man as ever. Alex Phillips is here, because you'll get all of this. You know, just like Daniel just said, 20 mile an hour zones. Where'd they come from? They just suddenly appeared. The council went 20 miles an hour.
Do you know what? There was this story the other day of poor Holly Willoughby, and I do say poor Holly Willoughby, knocking a man off his scooter and it fractured his neck. Because she was probably driving along in Barnes and, making a right turn, and these scooters whip out from everywhere. You know what it's like driving around London. But the thing